Okay, welcome to the Board of Selectmen's meeting Tuesday, June 12th, 2018 at 6 p.m. All selectmen are present. This meeting is for the purpose of town council interviews. At this time, would you please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. We're here to interview the first firm for the evening, Collins, Laughlin, and Peliquin. I want to thank you for being here with us, and I'll leave it up to you for opening remarks and introductions. But before I do that, let me introduce to you who's up here. We have Selectman Greg Bendel.
Good evening.
Selectman Mike McCoy.
Good evening.
I'm Kevin Kyra, I'm the chairman of the board. We have Jeff Hull, who's the town manager. Then we have Jonathan Eaton, selectman, and Ed Loud, selectman. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us in tonight. And in particular, thank you for being willing to consider having separate labor council. I know that has not been the model that you've had up to this point in time. It's a model that we're accustomed to working with in all the communities that we do labor council work, but we thought initially we would introduce you to the firm and why we think that this would be a good opportunity not only for us but for the town to use this model. Collins, Laughlin, and Peliquin is a firm that is completely invested in labor and employment law. We know enough of the municipal law stuff to be able to say that's for someone else. I mean, we know open meeting law, we know public records, we know those types of things, but most places that we work, we're called upon to do the labor and employment work and the collective bargaining, those types of issues, and we're very comfortable doing that. That's what we immerse ourselves in. We don't represent employees, we represent municipalities and school committees. That's all we do all day long. We think that we've established a reputation as a firm that not only has a depth of experience in that area, but also is somewhat the go-to firm for the municipal organizations that look for guidance in the labor and employment and collective bargaining area. My name's Leo Peliquin. I've been doing this type of work for 32 years. Melissa Murray, counting her time as a law student with us and her admission to the bar, she came to us as a law student 10 years ago. She was admitted to the bar 8 years ago, and when she came in, we thought we were grooming her, but ultimately she groomed all of us, and I think we're all the better for it. But we do all of this work, and when we do work for our cities, towns, and school committees, we can say to you, we don't send you any rookies. We don't have folks at our office with less than 8 years experience. That's Melissa. We don't consider that a rookie. She's 8 years of experience, but more like double that given the work that we do and how she's immersed herself into it. Tim Norris, who would be the second backup to me, he has 29 years of experience doing this type of work. The Collins in the name, Phil Collins, has 42 years of experience doing this type of work. Phil's at a point in his career now, we let you know this, I know Jeff knows, and Denise Casey knows that, you know, Phil's at the point, he's 68 years old, and he's asked us for permission to let him slow down a little bit. And we didn't give it to him, but then he went to his wife and she demanded that he slow down. So he knows who makes the decisions there. But Phil he's still very active. More so, he's going to slow down in the management side of the firm and in some of the practice of the firm, but he's still there plugging away as we sit here today. And we've kind of started that transition anyways with him doing more and more handing off of things that from clients that he used to do, and we've learned from Phil. Phil's learned from us. We feel we're very well positioned to be able to do that, and frankly to be able to take on additional work. We've got relationships with communities that are long-standing. In your own community, we've got relationship with your assistant town manager, human resources director, Denise Casey. When before she found Nirvana in Wilmington, she had positions in other places. So when we come to you and we say we can do this for you, we can do that for you, you don't only have our references that you're free to call to rely on, but I think Denise would tell you that when we've worked with her, she's been very comfortable doing so. We do any model that the community wants. Our view is it's not about us, it's about what the community wants. We have communities where they have us at the bargaining table. We have communities where we never see the bargaining table unless there's an impasse reached and they need some help. We have communities that will send us draft proposals, the union proposals, ask us for language ideas. We have communities that want us to do it all, to sit down. They don't want to be at the bargaining table. It's a difficult relationship for them. We have unions that are reasonable to deal with. We have unions that are acrimonious. So whatever it takes to get it done, our view is this business that we're in, particularly labor relations, the operative word relations, is about relationships. So, you know, one of the things we did when we saw your RFP is we asked some questions about who are the reps that you see here. And we see those reps ourselves. There's very few reps in the union field that we haven't seen. We know kind of the way they conduct themselves. I don't say that in a bad way, but I think they know the way we conduct ourselves. We like to see strong representation for the unions. That may seem a funny thing to say, but the reality is that when you have no leadership in the union, you never know when you make a deal whether it's going to be a deal. And we know when we see someone that we've been dealing with that if something's going to be made as a deal, it will go back and be ratified, and they know if we're going to make a deal, ultimately we go back to the board and it will be approved. We work cooperatively. We've never had a dispute with any town council that we work with. You know, we know what the work is that we're to do, what the work is that they're to do, and frankly, we don't even get involved in that. It's a matter of having another phone number. If someone calls us to do the work, we do the work. We don't say, you should have given that to us, nor do they say, you should have given that to us. Beyond our law practice, and the reason that I suggest to you that this is an opportunity for the town as well is not to be bragging about it, but I think if you check with the MMA and our references, we do a lot of seminars for the MMA. Recently in October with the medicinal marijuana and recreational marijuana coming into play, I did a seminar for the MMPA, the annual labor relations seminar, that, you know, what you have to do, what you can't do with someone that's on medicinal marijuana. We've done the annual labor relations update agency decisions for many years running. We get all the Civil Service Commission decisions before they're published anywhere other than on a website, because we do the management commentary for the publication that publishes those. They ask us to comment on them to indicate whether a decision represents a trend somewhere different than it was going. The same holds true for the Department of Labor Relations. Unfair labor practice decisions, we get all of those as well. We are consulted by the Mass Municipal Association on legislation that they're considering or they're considering opposing all the time. I'm up at virtually every MMA Labor and Personnel Policy Committee meeting on a monthly basis to keep in tune with what legislation is being proposed, what legislation employers should worry about. We We put out a monthly client advisor. You get that with your monthly bill. We hope that eases the pain a little bit when you see that, because it gives you some information on something that's developed in the area that we think it's important for clients to know about. If something happens between bills, then we send something out in an email blast. So I will tend to talk too much. Melissa will kick me under the table. I'd like to introduce you to Melissa Murray, my partner, and have her tell you a little bit about herself.
Melissa Murray, I've been with the firm since 2008. I did start as a law clerk, and I came in with an interest in labor and employment law. I do split my time between school and city and town representation, but even on the school side, I'm doing a lot of labor relations work. So I would say that the majority of my practice, 60 to 70%, is labor related. One thing that Leo, when he was outlining kind of how we provide services based on what the city or town wants, and that can run a whole gamut. But one thing that he didn't say is this morning I was with a client just going over a negotiation strategy. So for all unions, sitting down at the table before you start meeting with the folks who have contracts coming up and saying what do we want to obtain as a city or a town, kind of across all unions, and having a strategy going forward. And so there we developed a strategy. We're going to refine that, and then the city is actually going to start the bargaining process on their own and not have us at the table, but we've kind of helped them visualize what it is that they want to obtain moving forward. So that's something that we provide, and I thought that was a really good thing that we did moving forward. And I would just say that I think labor and employment law, I really enjoy it. It's been great working in this area, and it is specialized and it is different. Even in cities and towns that have city solicitors or that have town council, there is a real specialty in this area, and I think that it is worth having someone on board that knows what they're doing. We do trainings, we help with investigations, we represent cities and towns at the MCAD. We're just kind of, everywhere. And I'm sorry, there is a fly flying in my ear, so I apologize. So I don't know if anyone has any questions. I don't want to repeat ourselves, but
one thing that Melissa does that she mentioned, you have had a pretty good relationship with your police and fire departments, and we hope that continues. We don't come in making the relationship. We frankly hope there is a relationship, because that ultimately is the most important thing. We're not magicians, and we come to that. But there are places that don't have that good of a relationship, and they end up in interest arbitration. And interest arbitration is unfortunately becoming more common. There's some firms representing unions that have made it somewhat of a cottage industry now to do that. Melissa is the office data person in terms of comparability data, in terms of analyzing the data, letting a city or town know where they stand in terms of wages and benefits to police and fire unions. And that doesn't mean that you have to be in an interest arbitration to use it. We were at the first interview, and we could probably, from the data we've already compiled, be able to put together just from other matters, to tell the town when they go into bargaining, here's where you're vulnerable in terms of a union saying you don't pay enough here, or we're behind here, or we're behind there.
Right, that is definitely something else I do between the comparability data, but then also representation at the JLMC if you do end up there. That has become a large part of what I do.
You just answered my question.
Oh, okay.
I was going to say, how many times do you find yourself going to the state arbitration?
I mean, just in May, I had 3 hearings in 2 weeks up at the JLMC, 2 separate cases. I would say this year, I've been there on 2 cases. Last year, 3. Year before that, I think 2. And some of these are large, and they're taking 3 and 4 days. So the City of Worcester, City of Somerville. So I mean,
how does that usually work? I mean, I hear that we go into, I know it's a general question, but I hear that if we go to that board, we're going to lose. No matter what happens, we're definitely going to lose, so we should settle with what they want. Are they going to get more than what they're bargaining for?
I don't. Sorry to cut you off. I don't agree with that, or find that is always true. In fact, in Woburn, when we were doing police, they could have settled on the day of the first day of hearing. We offered them a settlement that was more generous than what they got at the end of the arbitration. I would say that in Worcester the same, and I can send you any of these decisions if you want to look at them. I don't think that that's true. There are areas that you might have to compromise and give on. You might not get everything that you want. Neither side is really going to get everything that they want. But I don't think that you always come out worse off than if you had settled. I think it's great to settle because it's important for the relationship. What Leo said, I mean, it's a toll on everyone to go to the JLMC. If you go there, you need to be prepared, and I think that's what we help you do. But it's better for the relationship to settle in most cases, in almost all cases, I would say. But I don't think that you lose if you go there necessarily. If we do your comparability data and I tell you that you are the lowest, your police or fire are the lowest paid in the area, and that they're the only ones not receiving this benefit, and they're the only ones not receiving that benefit, and you say, that's fine, we're not going to give it to them, let's go, you will probably lose on those issues if even our own data doesn't support our proposal or our offer. So that's why I think the comparability data is important. If everybody else is getting in some sort of a stipend, or for instance, like education, Quinville, or something like that. If everyone else in the area is getting some sort of police education stipend and you're not offering one, which I know isn't true, but you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. You don't want to go to hearing on that and be the only community not providing an education stipend. The arbitrator will look at that and say, you should be giving them something. So.
Right. Well, that's interesting. Thank you for that.
Sure.
Appreciate it. Questions? Yeah, Mr. Bennett.
Mr. Chairman, if I may, thank you. Good evening, and thank you for being here. My questions for the previous firms last week were focused around land use, so that's not going to apply here.
Yeah, we're not the people to call for your super fun sake.
No. I'm going to shift gears to, I know you mentioned the city of Somerville and the city of Woburn,
yep,
and others. I notice here under your references the town of Burlington, which is a little more comparable for me. Could you perhaps talk about your relationship with them, how long you've been with them, what kind of services you provided?
Well, Burlington, I've got to think it's got to be over 20 years. And with Burlington, we just did an interest arbitration. Tim Norris spearheaded that with their police in the last 3 or 4 months that was done. With Burlington, the model is varied depending on who the town administrator is. John Petrin is a very, very capable in the area of labor relations, so he tends to do most of the stuff at the table himself. When it gets into trouble like not being able to settle with the police, then he came to us. But you know, we will be involved in Burlington discipline cases, employment issues, general advice. There have been times when we've done more, there have been times when we've done less. So it's like that with a lot of our clients. Some will say, well, look, you got a lot of clients, how are you going to handle Wilmington? But folks should understand, sometimes you don't hear from a client for 3 months, and then sometimes you don't hear from them, a day doesn't go by. So it's all variable, and it kind of waxes and wanes. But I think John would be a good person to call, and particularly on the issue of the model. I mean, we don't tell John, hey, you should be using us. John tells us when he wants us to come in on something and give him some advice. And I work a lot with Chief Kent, working with the fire department. Those are 2 areas: discipline cases, general issues like that.
John's actually a management representative on the JLMC committee, so he was our management representative in Woburn Police. So he hears a lot of interest arbitration, so he's got a lot of kind of his own data to pull from in terms of what settlements are being reached and what what contracts and what interest arbitration decisions are coming out. So I think he draws on that a lot for his own bargaining.
You note here in your proposal quite a few references, but for the people at home and for the record, could you just let us know the number of communities that you're currently working with?
So we've got I'm sorry, I got to do the count myself, but again, understanding that we're not always doing. Melissa, you have the. Oh,
yeah, I think it's about 30 cities and towns, and then
it's about
15 school committees.
15 school committees.
How many private employers do you represent?
We don't. I wouldn't say that we never do those, but it's a very small part of our practice.
Okay, I did notice that there was a section on your website that is that more of a marketing, try and bring in more?
Well, we've tried, frankly, private employers, they're able to pay more than municipalities. So, but our niche, we've never really been able to establish that niche, and we're not unhappy about that. We want to be good at what we do in the niche we have, but I got a call from a private school about 6 months ago and have done some work there. I'll get a call from from, you know, a nursing home where someone on a local board of selectmen or working in a municipality will be on the board of directors and say, can you help us with this case or that case? We don't turn it away, but you're not going to see us, you know, representing a Raytheon or a big company like that. We don't have that type of a practice.
Yeah, and we don't pursue it in the way, I think did you mention like a marketing?
Yeah,
Like that,
I mean,
we do it, but it's mostly word of mouth. Like if somebody
Yeah.
knows somebody and they recommend us and they give us a call, like take a look at this policy or do this. Are we violating the FLSA? We'll do that, but we're not actively, you know, seeking out private clients. Our focus is public sector.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I just, obviously, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Obviously, you know, your specialties labor law, so I'm really limited to the questions, and I was trying to be consistent, but it seems like we already get the answers on how many attorneys and municipalities. But what did you say? How many people? I didn't hear that. How many attorneys do work for the law firm?
We have 4 partners.
Yeah.
We have 2 support staff, and even though they don't have legal paralegal credentials,
Right.
they really are like paralegals to us. We always have a law student that works for us to help us with the research. This particular law student has got 1 more semester of law school, so we do that. The law student helps us with research that someone 2nd and 3rd year of law school can do quite capably.
Yeah, no, I just was trying to be consistent, trying to figure out,
Absolutely.
you know, the ratio of how many attorneys work for a community and how many municipalities that you would work for. You know, so I do have the answers here, and obviously this is a little bit different for us because obviously we do hire like all under one roof. You know, if I could say, but you know, I'm all ears. I'm listening to what you have to say, and obviously you represented some reputable communities, and you've had some long-lasting relationships.
Well, I don't, all the competitors
Yes.
here are fine law firms. I would say, though, I would venture to
Expertise.
say
Yeah.
that in the labor and employment field, you won't find any of those firms with the depth of experience. When you start off with 32 years, 29 years, 42 years, I just don't think you're going to find that depth in there. That doesn't mean they're not fine attorneys, but I think with the experience factor is, you know, you get matters in more years and you see more matters, and then you have other attorneys that see more matters. So I won't say we've seen it all, because this is what makes the practice interesting. You think you've seen it all, and 2 weeks later you get a case that you've never seen. But generally speaking, being immersed in the issues, what's coming down the pike, health insurance changes, those types of things, between all of us, we really do see it all. And because we're small enough, we share it all. So it's not like you have to go to the 2nd floor to talk to anybody. The office is small. We're in constant communication about bouncing issues off people. What have you seen? Have you done?
No, I get that. That's your specialty.
Yeah.
No different than seeing a special doctor or a special restaurant. Everyone has a specialty, you know. But you know, and I get that. And I'm good, Mr. Chairman. I'm satisfied. Thank you.
Just in the interest of full disclosure, Attorney Murray and I did graduate from the same law school, the same class. We did not know each other on a personal level. But just in the interest of full disclosure to my colleagues and anyone watching at home, I did have a question as to billables. So you have 5 attorneys, and
We have 4 attorneys.
Yeah.
Is it Attorney Collins is kind of stepping back? Is that?
Yeah, well, he's Phil's 68. He's been doing it for 42 years. He's going to do less legal work, and he's going to do less management.
Yeah.
The big piece of is he's been the managing partner of the firm, and he's handing that off.
So it's the 2 of you and attorneys Norris and Coleman?
No, I should clarify that. Josh Coleman, when we put the proposal in, Josh Coleman was with the firm, was going to be the 2nd backup. Tim Norris will be the 2nd backup. Now, Tim actually has double the experience that Josh did. Josh had developed more of a liking for the school practice, and so he left it on a very amicable basis to go work for Murphy, Lamry and Murphy, which has a big practice in the school committee practice. So Josh was with us for several years, and at the time Denise had worked with him as well, but Denise has worked with all the rest of us.
Okay, so back to billables. About how many do each of your attorneys average per year for billable hours?
Well, if you ask our families or significant others, too many. But I would say that you're talking in the neighborhood of 2,000 billable hours. And in some of those, there's billable hours, and then there's also the total effort hours. I mean, the seminars don't count, yeah.
I get
Yeah,
that.
yeah.
To maybe, well, I don't want to advocate for you, so maybe you want to explain actually the difference for some of my colleagues here, the difference between billable and effort hours.
Well, we don't bill, the Mass Municipal Association doesn't pay us to go up and do the seminars. And we're not looking, we're not essentially that we're heroes either. It's a good marketing opportunity for us. It's also a good way for us to keep sharp in terms of these issues, because while you're doing the regular cases, yeah, you see something developing in the law, but to be able to like intensely look at it, that gives us an opportunity to do that and to get in front of an audience that needs that information, and so, you know, that's a lot of the work that we do. We don't charge for the commentary, but on the other hand, when someone says, hey, I just had this happen with a civil service employee, we know whether there's a case that just came down 6 months ago. We don't have to rely on word of mouth, and the same with the DLR.
So that's the difference between total effort hours and billable hours, is what I can tell.
Right, and everybody does a combination, you know, with speaking, seminars, writing, commentary, those types of things.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. A lot of my colleagues answered asked some of the questions I had written down, but one I had written down is training. What kind of training do you provide on the labor and law side of it that you guys specialize in to municipalities like a Wilmington or a Burlington or a Woburn or some of our other surrounding towns? What have you done in the past, and what do they typically cost? Because I noticed there was an added fee in there. So if you could elaborate on that a little, I'd appreciate it.
Melissa can speak to that as well, but we've done whatever training was requested of us. Sometimes it can be a collective bargaining workshop. You here, you know, you have folks already that are very experienced in that. Sometimes it can be on something in the FLSA. It can be sexual harassment training. It can be how to do an investigation. You know, anything we're asked to do. It's generally speaking, it's not always done at however many hours we do, we bill you for the hours. We certainly are willing to make arrangements that make cost-effective sense. There's a preventative aspect to that will work for the town and work for us. But, you know, we don't say, hey, we're going to do a training for you. Usually it's someone saying, I've got a lot of new department heads here, and I think it would be wise to have them sit down and understand, you know, the sexual harassment policy and what their obligations are, to understand, you know, overtime rules, you know, to understand, you know, leave rules, when do you have to let someone go, Small Necessities Act. So we do that, and frankly, some of the training that we do for the MMA, what we do with everything that we hand out there, if we don't end up seeing you at those meetings or those seminars, we ship it around to our clients. Right. So our clients benefit from that, and then they can ask us questions about that. Melissa?
I would say in terms of cost, if it's a training that we've done before or that we do on a regular basis, how to conduct investigations, that's one that we do regularly for clients. I mean, so we've got that training. It might just be our time getting there. It might, you know, so I think that's, if you have a need for a training, you just let us know what it is. If it's something we have, then we'll work out, and it would be a lot cheaper than if you have some unique need that you need training for that we haven't put together a presentation on. That there might be a little bit of background work in pulling that together. But and Leo mentioned the big one, sexual harassment, conducting investigations. We can do management trainers, management issues, how to, you know, conduct exit interviews. I mean, you have experienced staff right now, but if you were to have a bunch of new managers come on, we could do like a half-day workshop on how to be a manager, how to work effectively with employees, how to do any number of things, a primer on FLSA, FMLA, you know, different issues that they might have to deal with. So,
thank you.
Even though it's not training for everybody, we always say this to clients, and it's not because we're saying, oh, pay us, pay us, pay us. It's always better if you have a difficult issue to call first and get some advice as to how to handle it. We can't come into a situation where you say, we just discipline this employee or fire this employee. Here, take it, okay? We will be the first to tell you, you know, as I said, we're not magicians. We'll do the best we can when we get handed that, but the reality is those cases are won and lost from the very outset. How it's documented, You know, whether the employee had some due process, those types of things. So there's always a training aspect to that. If you have a department head, and most department heads, they'd rather be doing their jobs. You know, the labor and employment part of it is a headache, and one employee can make the headache get bigger and bigger and bigger. We know that from our own office. If we, you know, when we have, like, we don't have many of them for you, but we have a personnel issue, it just completely detracts from your ability to actually practice law. You've got to solve the issue. So we have an appreciation. So there's always kind of a one-on-one. If you've got someone that needs some guidance, that's the time to do it when you're trying to make sure that the roadmap is done correctly.
Best clients are the ones who have an issue, they have a plan that they think they want to put in place, and then they pick up the phone and at least just run it by you. Like, here's what I'm thinking of doing, here's the plan, here's how we're going to investigate this, or I want to put this person out on paid administrative leave while I'm investigating it. You know, and at least talk with us to kind of lay out what they want to do or how they want to see things happen, and we can give them some advice on whether that is legal, whether that makes sense, if there's any other options that they should look at. And then even if we're not rushing down here to solve the problem for you, you have the staff who can do it. At least we've kind of checked in, and now we know moving forward that we're going to kind of work together to make sure that we're dotting the I's and crossing the T's. And so that's preventative, it's great, it helps keep us informed, and it really saves a lot, I think, in the end, as opposed to getting what Leo described to kind of the fait accompli, where we then have to try to figure out how to possibly get you out of something.
And you know, the other thing is, our eye is always not towards how it's going to play with us. How's it going to play to a neutral party, if it gets to a neutral party, as to how you handled it? Because that's the most important thing, whether it looked like you did things reasonably, thoroughly, etc. So the temporary satisfaction of saying we just disciplined someone, boy, that can wear off really quick if you get to an arbitrator or the Civil Service Commission and they say, from their own judgment, and their judgment can be harsh, you were wrong. Now they come back, you pay them. Now you have still a problem employee, but an emboldened problem employee. So that's why that's our eye all the time. How is that going to play at the next stage?
Thank you.
Yeah, you answered my question again.
Oh,
It was-
great.
Yeah, about
Look at this.
having the information prior to, in the sense where you would have the contracts and you would have all of that information.
Yes, yep.
You know,
Actually, you can have it
ahead
on.
of time, in
Yep.
case questions arose, instead of waiting until the very last minute. So that's
Absolutely,
good. Yeah.
absolutely.
Jeff, did you have any?
You've talked a lot about preventive measures with respect to training and certainly encouraging the client to call you early on with respect to an issue that may be percolating. Any other approaches that you would take with your clients to try to prevent either the severity of the case or mitigate issues?
Yeah, for me, it's always encouraging clients to every once in a while look at their policies and practices, make sure that they've updated them, make sure they still make sense, make sure that they're following their policies if they have policies and they haven't moved away from it. Even just a review of contracts. So there's the bargaining, there's, you know, what the town wants to accomplish, but and I did look through some of your contracts leading into the first meeting, but going through and seeing, is there outdated language in here? Is there language that you just need to clean up because it's creating confusion? In another client, they had just a line under details in their police contract that said, if an employee works a detail that starts before noon, but then goes through the noon lunch hour, they will automatically be paid 8 hours for the detail. So if it started at 11 and they only worked till 1, because it crossed the noon lunch hour, they should get the 8 hours. No one knows where it came from. No one knows what the history was there, why it is. But it's a sentence in the contract that the union is now trying to enforce, and no one knows why it's there. So going through your contracts and looking and seeing if there's any kind of outdated stuff, or you're not sure why something is there, going back, maybe trying to find the history and looking at that and seeing, can we clean that up? Kind of the housekeeping aspect of your contracts, I think, is important. So that would be one thing that I recommend as well.
Jeff, I find, and I think I may have mentioned this at the screening committee level, if you get a grievance as a department head or at any level, whatever stage it's at, find out the union's position on it. I mean, you know, all too often, someone says grievance denied. You want to know what the ammunition is, the argument is on the other side. Sometimes it's a valid argument. Sometimes it incorporates the bargaining history and the practice. Don't assume because you read the language and you say, I just think it's clear. There's always another side to it. This is why we have the professions that we have, because there's always another side to the issue. The things that seem as black and white, there's always some gray in there. And so a good relationship with the union is important. Even a bad relationship is important, to be able to sit down and say, this is the way we see this, basically, what's your position on it? And then even if you write an answer to the grievance, you have a chance to address the position and make sure that you understand, or ultimately you may have a chance to settle the matter before it gets too far, and then you're in trouble.
You mentioned data on compensation. Is that done in-house, or is that something public records that you guys are making?
That's something that do in-house based on public records.
So you have your 30 communities, your 15 or 16 school boards, and you're kind of just saying, okay, this is what fire is getting paid here, and this is what...
No, so we would take a community and we do an analysis to see what are the comparable communities for that community. So some of them may be clients of ours, but if they're not, then we call the city or town and we get the contracts, if it's police or fire or some other Teamster, something like that. We get those contracts, then we bring those in. So the first step is identifying who your comparable communities would be and what are you going to use as the criteria for doing that. Then once we identify those communities, we get the current contracts for those communities, whether they're from our own records or from the city or town. Then we go through, we being me, I go through and I look at all of the contracts and pull out all the major sources of compensation, and I develop a total comp for a police or a firefighter most often at, you know, different stages of their career. So like 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, with education, without education, with a night differential, without a night differential, depending on what the benefits are in question. And so then I run, basically run those, and I show where the city or town shows up in that list. Are they kind of falling in the middle? Are they above average, below average? Is there an area where they're weak? We have some clients who don't offer a lot of benefits, and so they fall behind in a lot of areas, but their base wages are really, really high, and it totally makes up for it. Or they offer a holiday benefit that is just outrageous, and so they're short kind of across the board. You've got all these kind of reds in different areas, but base wages and holiday pay, and all of a sudden they're like top of the pack. So you have to look at the different areas, because your union might be coming in and saying, we're the only person not getting a night differential, or our night differential is so low. But then when you start looking at everything else that they get, that's just one element of compensation. So it's
and health insurance too is a big ticket item, because I know I'm working with a community now where the union brought in the data saying, look how far behind we are on the salaries. And then you looked, and the other community that they used was paying 10% less towards the health insurance. That's thousands of dollars. Mm-hmm. When you plug that into the formula, you realize, no, you're right in the ballpark where that other community is. So total compensation is the criteria, basically. That's when you go to these interest arbitrations. That's what you're looking at.
Do you ever find yourself overlapping with other law firms that you're working for, or does that ever happen? I know, you know, you have just the labor and employment side, and then there's the town council side. Is there any crossover at any time that you can do?
A little, but not.
Not really.
Well, I mean, we'll get an open meeting law issue, you know, about an employment matter. For example, there was a recent SJC case about what you could and couldn't share prior to the public meeting of doing an employee evaluation. So that's as much a labor council as a town council. If town council had fielded it, that was fine, but we happen to have gotten some questions along that line. So, you know, there'll be that. There'll be a public records request. The public records request will focus on, we want to see the investigation report, any investigation report about X, Y, and Z. So we end up fielding those and defending the town's position in terms of revealing that. Sometimes you have agreements where it says you can't reveal it except if it's consistent with the public records law. So there's an overlap there, but you know, it's always amicable. Sometimes, frankly, you know, town council is just as glad to say, you take this one, and sometimes we're glad to say, hey, you if you've got your handle on that one, if you need some help, call us. But you know, so things like that.
Sometimes with regional, for some of our school districts, they're regional school districts, so sometimes we'll represent one of the communities involved and another council will represent another community, and so there'll be overlap when we're dealing with certain issues. We represent a regional school district, but one of the communities that's involved does the bargaining, so we had a grievance in the regional school district, but the other council was bargaining the contract that would apply to the school, and so I just called her up, we talked about it, we agreed to put the grievance on hold because they were in the middle of contract negotiations, and so they were going to try to work it out at the table. If they couldn't work it out, the grievance would go forward, so then I would have done the grievance. So, I mean, it doesn't come up often, but when it does come up, it's usually very easy.
We're seeing recently is the intermunicipal agreements that affect labor, how you're going to use labor if you're going to share labor. So there's a component of that where you might have an employment agreement with an employee, but the employee will be employed by one, but ultimately service two communities. And the intermunicipal agreement speaks to the non-employer community's contribution to the cost of that the cost of that employee, even though they're an employee of X, half their time is spent at Y under an intermunicipal agreement. So in that instance, recently we actually are putting together the intermunicipal agreement with town council, both parties working on it, and then we're doing the employment contract for the community where that employee will ultimately be employed.
It's interesting because we have a person that works out of North Reading but services our
Right.
community, so that would
Oh, so
be
you have
right in
that.
line with
Yeah.
that. Yeah.
Mhm.
Okay. I think I'm all set. Anybody else? You all set? Yeah. Very impressive. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate you
If
being here
anyone
tonight.
has any questions, after we leave, feel free to call or email us. We'll be happy to.
Yeah. Do you have
them.
any summary?
No,
remarks? That's-
we appreciate, we know we're asking you a bit to depart from the model that's been comfortable for you. And, we think we offer an alternative that would make it more comfortable to do it this way. If you can get someone that's specialized in the field as we are, we think it's worth doing because the cost of legal services is a lot. We're not trying to diminish that, but we also would say that, sometimes the difference in an hourly rate or a retainer rate, if you've got someone that's doing this all the time, if someone else takes 5 or 10 minutes more, there goes the cost savings. And when you have 4 people that have done it for as long as we've done, we may be able to figure something out in a half an hour that would take someone else an hour and a half. So we appreciate your willingness to be open-minded about it, and thank you for having us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, we're going to go to a recess until our next appointment. Welcome back to the continuation of the town council interviews. We're here with the firm of Brooks and Durensis. Welcome. Thank you all for coming this evening. Let me introduce to you, I know we just did a little shaking of hands, but for the sake of how we've been doing it for everybody, we have Mr. Greg Bendel,
Good evening.
Mr. Mike McCoy,
Hello.
myself, Kevin Kyra, Jeff Hull is our town manager, Jonathan Eaton, and Ed Loud, Selectmen. And thank you for being here. And why don't we start with some opening remarks? I don't know who would, Mr. Durensis,
I
would you?
plan to do that.
Sure.
I'm Paul Durensis. I've been for the last 9 years a member of the Local Government Advisory Committee of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. Been appointed by Deval Patrick and now by Charlie Baker. It's been my honor and privilege to work on legislation that affects communities, looking out for the interests of all 351 cities and towns. Today, I spent most of the day working on something called the Housing Choices Bill, which is a bill that we have been negotiating between the cities and towns and the administration that would provide more housing opportunities, more funding, more ways to get affordable housing done in the Commonwealth. My role is like being in the kitchen, making the making the pizza. Everybody else that you've been seeing here in this interview process, they're on the other side of the counter. The stuff that we're doing, they have no idea. Because I work with legislators and work with the administration, I had a chance to work with your representative, Jim Maselli. And when he passed away, I was in the line to pay my respects to him. I didn't see any of these other lawyers that you've been talking about in line for Jim Maselli. He did a lot for cities and towns across the state. We have a 15-year relationship with Wilmington. We've carried the ball. We've delivered the results. We've been successful. We want to renew that relationship. As far as I can tell, we've offered the lowest price of everybody that you've looked at. I want to say a word about coverage. We have 12 lawyers at Brooks and Durensis. We have 5 towns. If you take the 12 lawyers and divide them by 5, you get 2.4 lawyers per town. Each lawyer, each town has 2.4 lawyers. I want you to compare that with a firm that has 43 lawyers in 125 towns. You divide 125 into 43, you get the number 0.3. Compare 0.3 to 2.4. We provide 8 times the coverage. 8 times the coverage, lawyer coverage, than that firm for a price less than what they've quoted. You might say, who are these 2.4 people? Well, if you have 43 lawyers, you're going to see 43 different lawyers from time to time. Wilmington has seen the same lawyers from us for years, and they're here. You know them. You know that they have delivered. You know that they've been available. You know that they're familiar with Wilmington. Part of being a good lawyer is not just knowing what the law is. It's knowing what the client is and what the client needs. So I'm going to let them speak, but let me just briefly introduce them to you. Lou Ross has been the point person. He has been available to you. He's the go-to guy. He has been there for you, proven his loyalty to you. Dan Deutsch combines being both an environmental expert and a litigator. Now, sometimes you get people who say they're good at environment. Sometimes you say people are good at being litigators. Litigators are trial lawyers. He combines them both. You don't have to hire 2 people to do the job. You got one guy who can do the whole thing. Then we've got Peter Barry. He's recognized as one of the best labor lawyers in the state. He's been doing this for a long time. I'll let him speak for himself. Then we have Kim Salant. She's handled your land use cases. She has a fabulous record of success. You know this. She has held the line for Wilmington where you needed to hold it. And finally, we bring to you Leonard Koppelman, who's the founder of Koppelman and Page and KP Law, who knows more about municipal law than anybody else, but who has now joined us and will tell you why we are the best choice of the alternatives that you have seen before you. So if I might start with Lou Ross.
Thank you. My name is Lou Ross. Thank you, members of the board, Chairman Kyra and Jeff Hall. Thank you for having us tonight. Thank you for having us demonstrate for you why Brooks & Durensis is the legal team for this community. We have, as Paul just stated, we have many attorneys at our firm. We're dedicated public servants, and we were providing this town and other municipalities with years of good and practical legal advice. The record of success that we have with this town and others speaks for itself. I'll let everyone at this table have a chance to explain what they do and how they do it. But I'm confident in this team, and we truly are a team. We work well together, and we communicate well, and we provide services as a team. So even though I might be the point person, Dan, Kim, Peter, Paul, Lenny would all be available to the town, and they're all resources. We're all resources to each other. So I wanted to make that clear. My own personal practice focuses on municipal land use and real estate matters. I've been responsible over the years for providing the town with direct legal advice to the town manager's office, the planning department, the building department, the board of health, the public works department. Hopefully I haven't left anyone off, but I've worked with a lot of people here at this town hall that have their boots on the ground that make this town run. I think I work well with them. I enjoy working with them. I hope they enjoy working with me. So I do think that because of that experience, we are the right choice for the town. This is a chance for us to reaffirm our relationship and work together going forward as we have in the past, and to continue to provide the town with legal services seamlessly and without interruption. And again, we're all dedicated public servants. Mr. Durensis has been a many-term selectman for the town of Sherburne, as well as all his activities with the state. I'm on my community's finance committee. Attorney Berry is a multiple-term selectman in his town, and I know that Mr. Koppelman is also been a public servant for many years. So we know what it's like to provide legal advice. But we also know what it's like to be active in our communities and to try to provide advice that is sensitive to the residents of this community. And I think we bring that to the table. And with that, I'd like to turn the floor over to Mr. Deutsch.
Good evening. We truly appreciate, we don't just look forward to, but we relish the opportunity to talk with you. And I say that sincerely. Over 15 years, and I know I speak not just for myself, but my colleagues here, over 15 years we've developed an intimate knowledge and understanding of the town, the people, the players in the town, the boards, the needs and the priorities of Wilmington specifically. And we know, having represented many towns, including, as we do now, communities of similar size, that each town is different. Its geography is unique, its population varies, and the priorities of the town vary over time. So we're glad to be here, and thank you for hearing us and for having invested your faith and trust in us over all these years. There is value, I believe, financially, but not just in dollar terms, beyond dollars, in having that group of people continue to advise and represent you and your boards. We bring the efficiency of a close-knit group of attorneys, all of whom, every one of whom, has worked with and for, shoulder to shoulder, you and your colleagues in the town. So we bring that efficiency, and that allows us to be responsive, to provide you with timely and relevant, reliable information, input, advice, and representation. I know this also from my own involvement in the town of Lexington, where I live, in Lexington 2020. This goes back a bit. 2020 is just about upon us. Strategic Planning Committee. So I've had that perspective as well. My work for Wilmington has varied quite a bit. As Paul says, I have been litigating cases in state and federal courts before federal, local, and state administrative agencies and appellate courts for over 30 years, and for Wilmington as well, both litigating and advising Wilmington on matters. You have a particularly complex set of matters before you, including the Olin and New England Transrail matter, including the Wilmington High School construction issues, and other matters that deserve the attention of somebody who has been steeped in those matters and whose experience is relevant to them. I think I bring that to you in the context of environmental background and breadth of litigation experience. We'll get into that further, and I'm happy to answer all your questions on that score. Thank you. Peter.
Thank you and good evening. My name is Peter Berry. My expertise is in labor and employment law. Just to give you a little sense of my background, for the first 15 years that I practiced law, I worked as in-house counsel for large public authorities. And in that role, I oversaw a very large staff of labor unions and different kinds of clerical, trades, police, very wide range of different unions that I dealt with. I also dealt with all the employment issues that came out of that labor force. In time, of course, the employment issues have taken over a lot of the traditional labor relations work with all the new laws in employment, in the employment area. But that was the first 15 years of my career. For the last 25 years, I've been working with the firm and representing management, cities and towns, large public authorities. In the 90s, when Governor Patrick first came in, I worked with a group of both labor side lawyers and management lawyers to rewrite the public sector labor relations law and reform the law, make it more efficient. The law passed. Governor Patrick then appointed me to the first Commonwealth, what's now called the Commonwealth Employment Relations Board Advisory Panel. Our role was to recommend to the governor the commissioners for the board. We recommend Marjorie Whitner as chair, who is still there 15 years later, so that was certainly a good recommendation. For many years, I chaired a conference that the Boston Bar Association puts on at Harvard Law School. It's 30 years now, 35 years, I guess now. An update on labor relations law, and we bring in the commissioners from the Civil Service Commission, the commissioners from the Employment Relations Board, the chair of the Joint Labor Management Committee to put on panel presentations about developments in the law each year. So I've worked very closely with, for instance, the JLMC. Used to be John Dunlap, a famous labor economist from Harvard, was the original chair. He passed away. Now it's John Hanson, who I know personally and have worked with in the past. He was the labor representative who helped mediate a lot of cases before they went to hearing. So I've had experience with every agency in the state that deals with employment law, MCAD, Civil Service Commission. I've recently, the last few years, been appointed by Mayor Curtatone in Somerville to be his representative for appointing authority hearings for civil service discipline cases, mostly police cases, but DPW cases, other employees in the city who are covered by civil service law. I write the decisions. The mayor then accepts them and issues the final opinion. So I have 35, 40 years of experience working in labor and employment matters. There's very few questions that I haven't had experience with, and I certainly know where to go to get the answers if I don't find them in the books, who to talk to in the state government that would point me in the right direction. So on my personal side, I am a Marine Corps combat veteran. I moved to Acton 30 years ago. At that time was working as the general counsel for the Boston Housing Authority. There was a vacancy at the Housing Authority in Acton, so I immediately got on the Housing Authority board in Acton. Moved on to the Community Housing Corporation, deals with 40Bs, LIP programs in Acton. Moved on to the Zoning Board of Appeals, moved on to the Conservation Commission, was the first chair of the Community Preservation Committee in Acton in 2002. We were one of the first towns to sign on. and now I'm on my third term on the Board of Selectmen. So municipal government, local government is part of my DNA. I do it because I love it, and I think the experience that I've had both working in-house for public agencies and working for various town boards and now on the Board of Selectmen allows me to especially give practical advice to clients because I understand how things work. I can provide real practical advice as well as strict legal advice. Thank you.
Thank you. My name is Kimberly Salant. My friends call me Kim. Please call me Kim. I've worked with you folks for a very long time, but I began my legal career in 1986 as what I call a baby lawyer. I worked in New England's largest insurance defense firm, and in that employment I was called to represent over 60 different communities within the Commonwealth, a special town council, and briefed and argued over 60 dispositive motions in federal court, and I was known by friends and enemies as the summary judgment queen. After leaving that employment, I became assistant corporation counsel for the city of Boston, trying primarily police and land use cases in the federal court, and as I want to be first seat, not second seat, I joined these folks in 1997. I try all kinds of cases in state and federal court, in the state court, at the district court level, at the superior court level, and so on. I've also tried cases in the state building code appeals court. I've tried in land court, in the appeals court, and the SJC. For over 30 years, I've represented all kinds of municipal entities. I've represented all kinds of municipal officials and all kinds of municipal employees, boards of health, boards of selectmen, planning boards, town councils, building inspectors, sewer commissions, sewer commissioners, water commissioners, and police chiefs. I do 40A work, I do 40B work, I do Chapter 41 subdivision work, I do Chapter 231A DJ declaratory actions. I have defended certiorari cases and mandamus cases. I am probably the most learned, because I don't suffer from false modesty, on the official map statutes, which is a very unique part of the town of Wilmington. I sat with my case file list, which at this point numbers over 105 pages, and counted the number of victories for Wilmington. Out of the 36 matters I have handled successfully through trial, I have won every single one of them. I have secured judgment or a stipulation of dismissal in other matters. I have dealt with Wilmington's, I guess you could say he's the most litigious citizen you've got in the town of Wilmington. So when I say that I have beaten him 11 times, it's really not fair, because usually I have to beat him twice. I have also engaged in enforcement actions, particularly with your building inspector, who has done some enforcement actions on violations of the Wetlands Protections Act. Oh, I know how to do that. I have done lots of firearms cases and have a great relationship with Chief Bagonis. I don't know if you folks have ever been involved with those firearms appeals, but they are to protect the citizens of the town. Lots of those are suspensions or denials or revocations are due to some very serious issues. We have succeeded on each and every one of them. I've also developed a procedure in the district court, because the statute doesn't set forth a procedure, which has been widely accepted by the district court in Woburn and other matters as well. All the cases I've handled run the gamut of land use. You talk about it, I've done it. I've responded to many subpoenas, assisted many folks in this town who have been subpoenaed or have also been responsible for responding to public records requests. I know those things ebb and flow, but they're extremely important that they be responded to quickly and properly. I'm well known in my field of expertise. I enjoy a great reputation amongst my peers, which helps to bring down litigation costs. Litigation is not inexpensive. Principal costs principal. When I have been, and I've seen some of the folks that you have interviewed, folks that are my peers, folks that are my colleagues, folks that I've sat on the same side of the table with and on the opposite side of the table with. And when they're sitting on the opposite side of the table, we make them take the laboring war. But I can tell you with no doubt in my mind that none of those lawyers, whose names will not be spoken, have never beaten me. And they will not beat me in the future. So, I look at this as an opportunity to reaffirm your relationship and our relationship with you, for an opportunity to have top-notch counsel. He stole my line about boots on the ground, because I think boots on the ground is incredibly important, who have delivered success to you folks time and time again. And I appreciate the opportunity to be here and speak with you. And I hope we can continue our relationship, because I think it works well for you and for us. Thanks.
All right, I'm Len Kopelman, and let me tell you why I'm here. I'm here because I was the managing partner and founded and became the managing partner of Kopelman and Page. And I grew the firm, made my mistakes. I think I try to figure out how to cure some of them, like rather than be all over the state, set up offices in different parts of the state and have a team and have them out there. And it cut to the point where there was a fear. My partner had died, Don Page, from Kopelman and Page. And I was taking over some of his duties. And I wanted to get a new management committee going, because to me, sometimes it was getting very repetitive, where you take minutes and waste hours. So I figured I could do more by not being in the management of the firm, let them manage it. And so I removed myself from the management committee. I figured it was time. At that point, the problem was I promised I'd stay on as long as needed, and so I figured I'll deal with the towns. I enjoy doing town work. I always have. It's been my whole practice. I had some problems because I never expected that I was going to become the head of the complaint department. And it was very disconcerting when you build something up and you find that there are a lot of problems. So rather than tell you what the problems are, I'll tell you what the result of the problems were. The result of the problems were that one town in particular, Stoughton, called me up, and they were very upset with the firm. They thought it was too many, they weren't happy with the change. And I said, no, they're a good firm. They are. They're excellent lawyers. They really are. So I went over to the new managing partner, and I said, you know, this is easy to cure. Here's what you need to do. And I explained to her how to do it and what could be done. And they still complain. And they had some legitimate complaints. It got to the point where they called me up and they said, what'll it take? We want another law firm. Who would you recommend? And I started thinking about Paul, because Paul's one of the few lawyers that I really respect a lot. And in fact, he is a fabulous, Paul Durance is a fabulous lawyer. And they said, well, what'll it take to get you? Now, I had sort of an interest in Stoughton at that point because it was my first town. And I said, well, you know, you really need a firm at this point, because you know, I'm going to leave. I'm not happy where I am now. And so I left and basically have been doing it. And what's happened is that the rest of the story is that other large towns that I really cared about have left too. The town of Burlington, the town of Chelmsford, all within 1 year. Those towns have 30,000 apiece. And other smaller towns that I had worked hard with, and the smaller ones like Lunenburg. So I started seeing this thing falling apart, and mainly because they don't have the staffing. What that firm did, and I was proud of it because I thought it was very good, is we would do special counsel work. So when town councils couldn't do things, they would call them up, and it became they came first. They were charged more money. And that's not the way I ever operated. And so I met with Paul and talked to him because I know what the needs were for special counsel, and I asked him, you know, could you do this? Can you do this? And it seemed that he had everyone there, and I met them and talked to them, and they have no associates. They're all partners. They all care. They have a minimum of, take a look at them. That's the youngest of the crew. They're good. They're not hiring a lot of newbies and having them learn on your coin. So I feel very comfortable with them, and I'm glad to work there. I find them very professional. So as far as I'm concerned, I just want to let you know how I feel and why I'm there with them.
Thanks, Len. Any questions?
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, we're going to stop. Go ahead, John.
What I'm looking for is an explanation as to what happened with Deutsch Williams. I could use a little bit of a background on it. As we're all aware, Deutsch Williams ceased to be in our town council right as our municipal calendar got very busy. And from my perspective, that was certainly an inconvenience, at least to us. And there were several selectmen meetings where there was quite a bit of discussion as to what direction we were going to head just to finish out fiscal 19. So I could benefit certainly from a bit of a focus on what happened with Deutsch Williams. How big were you when the decision was made to dissolve, and what led to that decision?
If I would take to answer that, I am as unhappy with that set of events as you've indicated. This happened because our lease was expiring, and a group of labor lawyers felt they wanted not to be in the city. They wanted to be in the suburbs. They thought things were cheaper, shorter commute, all that kind of stuff. The rest of us consider ourselves Boston lawyers. We want to be centrally located so we can walk to the courts, we can walk to the State House, we can be close to, I want to be close to state government. So I wanted to be in Boston. Our lease was expiring. We came to the end of the lease. The labor people left. The municipal law group stay together. They're here. I did not like the fact that the firm dissolved. There was about 21 lawyers at the time, and 10 went one way, 9 went the other, and 1 went a third way. And of the 9, we've added lawyers since then to fill out our complement, because we want to have a full team for you. That's why we have Lenny. That's why we have Rod Hoffman we brought back. So we filled out the talent that we needed to have us go forward. We wanted to continue representing Wilmington. What we wanted was for that relationship not to end, but to be transferred to us within the firm, to have those who are leaving leave, and for us to continue with Wilmington. Instead, someone sent a letter here that terminated the relationship with Wilmington. That isn't anything that I consented to, agreed to. I immediately called up Jeff and said, we will continue. We will not leave the town in any kind of default or mess. We will cover everything. We'll carry on. That was our attitude. We value the relationship with Wilmington. We care about Wilmington. I think we've proven over 15 years, we really care about this community. We're not going to let it drop between the cracks.
Okay. Attorney Berry, are you the only attorney in the firm that handles labor and employment cases?
I have backup. Paul does labor work, employment work. Kim is a litigator, has done a lot of arbitrations under union contracts and appeals to Superior Court of labor and employment cases. Dan Deutsch does labor and employment work as well. So we have a deep bench in the labor field. Okay,
I know that we're currently and we've previously been on a flat fee basis with Deutsch Williams. Did Deutsch Williams track hours, billable hours, otherwise billable hours, even though we were under a flat fee basis?
Well, I'll answer that. Most of the time, yes. And I did bring, we've been organized since April 1. So I did bring the May invoice that has all the time charges here.
Do you have it for the time with Deutsch Williams, not just during this
I-
fiscal year, but for prior years?
I don't have access to those. I can try to get access to those. When the firm dissolved, we did not get those records, but I did bring ours. You can see that we charge a monthly retainer of $25,670. We agreed to pay for a labor case, which was $4,000, so the net for us was $21,000, and our time charges were $33,000. So,
How many hours?
here, you're welcome to take a look at it.
Just to follow that up, I think I'll refer to the town manager. The town manager, when you received the invoices from the prior firm, did you get the billable hours attached with the invoice?
No.
Thank you.
I'm sorry, what was that question, Kevin?
I asked, following up on Jonathan's question about billable hours, I asked if when the invoice came in, did we receive the billable hours with the invoice, and the answer is no.
Can I follow up with part of Jonathan's question? When you guys broke up, what's preventing you guys from breaking up again and putting us through this process again?
Because we're a cohesive team that's been together for decades. Dan's been with me 29 years, Dan, has it been?
I have to do the math. That's it. 1988. Yeah, 29 years.
29 years.
I mean,
We'll change.
we can go around the table. They've all been with us for a long time, a very long time.
That was true with Deutsch Williams though as well, right?
Not with the labor group.
Okay, but
The
at least the
group-
five that are at the table, we're all, had been together for a long time for a different firm, correct?
We have been together since the 80s.
Looking at, all right, I'm looking, Attorney Ross, you had given me a spreadsheet and it appears to have some invoices in there. One is dated June 5th. Attorney Berry, you billed, at least you kept track of 0.3 hours. Attorney Hargrove, 1.4, and Attorney Ross, 53.4. Is this for, this looks like it's for all of May?
Correct.
Okay. In May, April and May is probably your busiest months of the, I'm
Well-
assuming your busiest months of the year, correct?
I would concur. Town meeting time is the busiest
Yeah.
time. That's just for the month of May, not for April at all. It's just that 1 month.
Were there any other attorneys in Brooks and Durensis that did any billable work during May?
I think it would appear on that bill. To be
Those
honest,
are the
I have
only
not
three that
been-
are listed, that's why I ask.
If you, there are different matters. We have each litigation listed separately. So as you turn the pages, you'll see different lawyers working on different things.
Yeah, and I'm seeing LMR, which is Attorney Ross. I am seeing, it's mostly you, Attorney Ross. Is JTH, which is Attorney
Jim
Hargrove,
Hargrove.
and then Attorney Berry. I am looking for. I see your .3, Attorney Berry. I'm just using the hourly rate that you put here. That's $11,000 worth of legal fees for May, which would be your busiest of 2 months, correct? As you've said, April, May, your two busiest years.
Well,
I
the
understand it
legal
fluctuates
fees-
quite a bit with labor and employment and with different litigation cases too, but
The legal fees are $36,000.
I know, and I'm doing the math at the hourly rate of $200 at 57 ish hours, and it's $11,000. And I'm just kind of starting to question what we'd previously been paying at roughly $300,000 over the course of a year.
If you divide it the other way around, that's about $150 an hour. Assuming we didn't have to pay $4,000 out of this to Wendy Chu, who's handling a particular case. So although that shows the $25,000 paid to us, we write a check for $4,000 out of that to cover a labor case. It's not in those sheets at all.
But this is the hours that were billed. So the total number of hours it appears that Brooks and Durances did on the Town of Wilmington matters appears to be 0.3 from Attorney Berry, 53.4 from Attorney Ross, and 1.4 from Attorney Hargrove. Was there any other work performed for the Town of Wilmington by Brooks and Durances?
Could I?
Please.
I'm handling both the Eco Site and the Tresca matters.
So you should be on here too, but you're not?
I'm on the front page. I don't see the invoices you're talking about, but I'll tell you how I do my hourly. I'll tell you how I do my hourly
Please
time.
do.
If I could, Jonathan. Okay.
Okay. Okay. I think I get it. Thank you.
So you should have information from me. Well, not information from me, but I did work on both EcoSite and the Tresca matters in the month of May.
I'm looking for it, so bear with me. Keep talking.
When I come in the morning, Jonathan, I sit down with a timesheet.
What's that?
When I come in the morning, I sit down with a timesheet.
Yeah.
As you probably know. You probably do it yourself. Okay? I write down exactly what I do. Sometimes I bill an hourly rate for it, sometimes I don't. When I place a telephone call, it takes me 3 minutes. I don't bill for that. It's on my timesheet, but I don't bill for that. When I'm done at the end of the day, I have a timesheet, usually two-sided and sometimes scribbly by the end of the day. That's just the way the life is for a litigator. And I submit it on a daily basis or maybe once every 2 days if my secretary is like losing it. This is too much work to do. But I can guarantee that I did do litigation work in both the Tresca and the EcoSite matters. I don't know what you're looking at. I didn't put it together. But rest assured, if Kim Salant doesn't appear there, she should be. And I know that EcoSite and Tresca were pretty substantial in the last May and will be for June.
As I recall from looking at the document briefly, Mr. Eaton, the cover page is a summary of sorts and identifies each of the various matters. There are over 20 of them, I think. The number of hours reflected in the right column appears for some but not all of the matters. However, the dollar total, subtotal of the billed time for those matters appears for each of them. And I think those two matters that Kim just referenced do appear there. And it looks like there fairly substantial time was expended on those. I know that I was also involved, somewhat less than typical, but nonetheless involved in various matters on behalf of Wilmington during the month of May. And if the document you have before you is not adequate or doesn't include certain detail, I'm sure we can provide that to you without trouble. We're happy to do so. But we do all bill to the 10th of an hour. And for litigators, especially, I think it is, it's in our blood, for better or worse. It's a relief sometimes at the end of the day to, not continue 24/7 doing that, but it's ingrained in us and nearly automatic.
Each case has got its own separate bill. They're all together. The cover sheet takes the total from each of those bills.
What kind of analysis is done to compensation data for labor employment cases and labor employment matters across communities? So are you looking at other communities and what benefits and salary that different unions are being offered?
Sure, absolutely. That's a basic analysis. First of all, coming up with the list of comparable communities. The MMA puts out a benefits analysis. They survey all the communities, so you have information from them. We can get labor contracts from other communities. And Usually before we put any proposals or positions together, we're well aware of how the employees in a particular community compare in terms of benefits and wages and whatnot to other comparable communities.
Your packet had included some information about renewable energy initiatives. I was wondering if you could speak to that and anything that you're working on that for the town of Wilmington, or if not, any obstacles to doing so.
Well, we're not currently working on any programs for the town of Wilmington related to renewable energy. In the past, we've been very involved with converting prior landfills to solar farms, essentially to generate electricity for municipalities. That's usually enough to generate enough to cover the municipality's electric bills for the over the course of a year. We've also been involved on the other side of things, defending municipal decisions related to wind turbines. We've been involved in that. We have not been involved in any permitting for wind turbines, but we've defended against the proposal to install one, and those are the two basic forms of renewable energy. So we do have experience with both of those programs.
If I could just add to it, we helped put together one of the largest solar panel farms, if you will, in New England for the town of Canton. Took it from soup to nuts, and it is working out quite well for the community. Produces a substantial amount of revenue and a reduction in bills. So they get both a lease for the landfill, lease payments, and they get free electricity.
It's about a 45-acre solar panel array.
Excuse me. I would add, both Lou and I have had some involvement on behalf of the town of Canton. I've also worked on contracts for solar power generation for school districts and regional school districts, so that solar panels are installed on the roof of schools, and agreements are entered into by the regional school district and its constituent members to harness that energy for their own operations and receive the credits of excess power that's generated by their installations. So it saves the money and makes the money.
Are you still working for Canton now? Was that one of the 5 towns?
Yes.
You're welcome to call.
Mr. Baker?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good evening, everybody, and thank you for your presentation. Obviously very impressive. I have only been on the board now for 2 years, and in that time I've only met with Mr. Deutsch and Mr. Ross, and then others from the other fraction, if you will. Mr. Foskett comes to mind, but so obviously it's very nice to meet the rest of you. I want to thank Mr. Barry for your service to our country off the bat, and I have a few questions, if I may. One is, you mentioned the 5 towns, Wilmington being one of them that you're currently working with. How many towns went with the other group of folks? Were there
None as town council.
none as town council?
They don't do town council work.
So were there any other towns that went with the other group for any other services?
Yes, they represent a whole bunch of school committees. I'm trying to think if there were any municipalities. I'm not sure.
Well, there were a few Brookline, the town of Brookline, but they just do labor work. I mean, they're special labor council. They're not the general municipal council.
Okay, and just in fairness, the question that I asked to all the other firms was about land use. So perhaps you could just describe to me exactly who would be. I'm not going to get into what land uses because you're familiar with Wilmington already. But who exactly would be working on land issue, the possibility of land issues in the future for Wilmington?
Well, thank you. Land use, at least before it gets to litigation, I would handle those issues. After litigation, it would be Attorney Salant, and her record's impeccable. But I would be handling all your counseling and advice related to planning board matters, subdivision matters, zoning, boards of appeals, and additionally, if you include real estate acquisitions and dispositions as part of land use, I would be doing that. I've been doing it for years. I helped the town with the acquisition of the Yentl Farm, with the acquisition of St. Dorothy's Church. I've helped the town with its bylaws and regulations. I work routinely with your Director of Planning and Conservation. I work with your Engineering Department, your Building Department. And so I would be the one who would continue to help with those matters. I've got over, this year, 20 years of experience now in land use and real estate matters. And so I have a good handle on those, and as well as the official map, which is rather unique to Wilmington, and the plan would be for me to continue to represent the town on those matters.
Great. And then my last question for you folks is, of the 5 communities, obviously Wilmington we're aware of, but the other 4, what's the length of time you've been working with those folks?
Town of Canton was 2003, so that's 15 years. The town of Cohasset was, I think, 1996, so that's 22 years. The town of Mansfield, I think, 8 years now. The town of Randolph, I first started working with them in 1981. So that would be 81 to...
Long time.
A long time. 37 years.
Yeah, a long time.
And so forgive me, one other question comes to mind here. So is it in your newly formed group, is it your desire to take on more communities at this point? Besides Wilmington, which is obviously why you're here?
It depends on the results of this process.
That's fair.
We're good with what we have, but if things, and I hope that's not the case, we don't want to be a couple on the page. I'm sorry. All due respect. We think you have a different model. You can go with a couple on the page model where you call when you have a need. You get the lawyer who comes over and handles you. We try to be part of the team. We try to be much more involved. And to do that, you can't do a large number of communities. You have to know the communities. If you have 125 communities, how can you remember which town had an issue with regard to what? It's more than you can handle. So we're pretty good. We're pretty good sized where we're at.
Thank you for your time. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, I'll start. Thank you. I just want to, I get it. Thank you. I just want to be pretty consistent. I've asked all the law firms that came before our board pretty much the same questions as Mr. Bendel said, and I know Mr. Durenza seemed to answer it. And my point was, what I was looking at is, the amount of towns. It sounds like there's 12 attorneys. You're doing 5 towns, and it comes to a little bit more than 2.5 in that vicinity of people per community. And that was one of my biggest concerns, to see that we would get our attention. And just to touch upon a few things that I remember, a lot of these faces. I just got elected last year. I'll be serving 30 years in a couple of years from now. And I know Mr. Bendel's been here a couple of years, Mr. Kyra a couple of years, and I know they're familiar with who they've seen. And I remember being in executive session with a lot of important matters where Kim Salant was there, where I've heard Gona spoke very favorable of you as the litigator. I've heard Carol Hamilton speak when it comes to certain matters, or Donald Onesite when we had matters that spoke very favorable of these folks that are here. I mean, sometimes longevity does play a good role, sometimes it may not, but it depends. But I like a word called stability. I owned a successful restaurant for a long period of time, and I like stability. And I say it nicely is that, and I know my colleagues, outstanding people, they're doing a great job, and I understand some people may be unfamiliar with some faces, but I've seen these faces here for a long time. And I believe that the town has been well-served with these faces. Not only me as a member of the Board of Selectmen, but other department heads. I can't go in too much in executive session. I can give generalizations, but I can't say verbatim. But I've heard a lot of positive things from these department heads relative to this law firm. And I know I talked to Jeff on a couple occasions, and I'll tell you, I wouldn't want to meet you in a dark alley. I'll tell you right now. I'm a little afraid. And I remember we talked, even myself with the town manager, you're one hell of a litigator. I heard that constantly over and over. And the point I like to make is, it seems like, and I say it, you know, you got your big guns here, and that's it in a nutshell. And I was happy to interview everybody, and we came across some nice people. And but you know, sometimes being around, it says a lot. And I like a word called stability. When I owned a business, I tried to keep the best people on my job for a long period of time. I really didn't want to see them go somewhere else. And that's what I like to see. And I respect my colleagues, but I've been here a while. And I was kind of a little bit of I'm going to use a George Bush term, a little shock and awe when I saw Mr. Kopelman. I thought I recognized the face. So you're part of the team, and you are one of the lead municipal attorneys here in the Commonwealth. There's no question about that. And you know, those are just a few comments that I wanted to make. And like I said, for me, I wanted to make sure when I talk about stability, I wanted to make sure that we are going to have the familiar faces. And we've had them for a long time right up here. And it means to me that you get a good bang for your buck. And the bottom line is that we have ample attorneys taking care of things on a personal basis. And that means a lot to folks. And I just want to finish up with a little bit more. I know I have a memo here from the town manager. And I understand, you know, the town manager does a good job. He tries to, you know, tell us to say, you know, certain things or what direction to go. And I noticed in his letter from May 25th, 2018, one of the things here he talks about is, you know, when we talk about interviewing is, we still have a serious situation. And one of the lead things that the manager has here himself, and I've talked about it as well, and other members talked about Olin Chemical, New England Transrail. And I know that's South Wilmington. And there are a lot of folks in this community that I bump into who are very concerned. They may not live in South Wilmington, but it affects their quality of life in this community. And they're concerned as well. And I just, you know, I see Mr. Deutsch, and I like to, you know, ask him a couple of questions if I could. But the bottom line is, we lost 5 with those 9 wells down there. And that was perhaps one of our greatest natural resources. At one time, we used to sell water to another community. Right now, we're at the mercy of the MWRA. And I know this is an ongoing battle with New England Transrail and Olin Chemical. And it's serious. NDMA is in there. And, you know, right now, we just signed a document last night allowing Olin, they hired a subcontractor to go out to drill holes to test the water. So this is an ongoing thing. This is not going away. And this is a very, very serious situation here. And I'd just like to ask Mr. Dan Deutsch, and I think you are also a great litigator, and I've also heard from other people, department heads, other folks outside, you know, and but I still would not want to meet her in a dark alley. You I wouldn't have an issue with, but, you know, I just want to say, but I just want to ask you, Mr. Deutsch, that a quick question. You know, other selectmen ask questions of other law firms about Olin Chemical and New England Transrail. So that's in the foremost front. That's a serious situation. You've been on for a long period of time. Could you please tell me, relative to New England Transrail, that do you think it's easy enough for like somebody to catch on for a couple of days, or is this going to take years for somebody to catch on? Because I know that you worked really hard on that. So I'm really talking about catch-up time. So, for example, it depends on what law firm that we get. Does it take years to catch up on a matter like this? Is it only going to take days? I know we're going on 30 years now with Olin Chemical relative to that situation. And what I'm trying to say is, given all the difficulties we had, is this something easily that can be taken care of and transferred to somebody in a couple of days? The history on this, it's 3 decades.
Thank you, Mr. McCoy. Yes, and we've been living that history with Wilmington, truly. I've been involved in representing Wilmington through advice, through negotiation, litigation in various tribunals, including the Surface Transportation Board with respect to New England Transrail's really unique and complex development proposal. I negotiated with the DEP and with Olin's counsel, who then became the chief of the DEP, a conservation restriction for half of the Olin site, which an important measure to protect natural environment, but It's been an ongoing battle and continues to be to protect the town on the remainder of the Olin site. We entered into, negotiated, the town did a standstill agreement with Olin and its predecessors and title on the site there to preserve the rights and the opportunities of Wilmington to pursue claims against Olin and the others in the event that it was appropriate and necessary. And you have that protection going forward. The Olin site, as you know, was originally a DEP jurisdiction site. It was then added to the national priorities list and became one of the top 14 Superfund sites in the country. It presents a really complex web of environmental concerns, logistical concerns, and litigation problems. New England Transrail, I've worked on with you since approximately 2005. We've called Transrail at every turn on misrepresentations, contradictions between statements to the DEP and the Surface Transportation Board, false start filings, and they have had to go back to the drawing board repeatedly. In 2007, I appeared in Washington, D.C. with some of your fellow town officers before the Surface Transportation Board and with Senator Lautenberg of New Jersey, late senator. Those objections and involvement contributed to the passage by Congress in 2008 of the Clean Railroads Act, which changed the structure of the regulations concerning rail-based solid waste facilities. All this led ultimately Transrail to abandon the solid waste, rail-based solid waste facility that had been proposed for years, and more recently to propose a commodities transloading facility. This is really a unique and very complex matter. It may be the only large-scale industrial development proposal in the United States fully within the exclusive jurisdiction of the Surface Transportation Board and not subject to local pre-permitting site assignment process that usually applies, that lies fully on a still unresolved Superfund site that's undergoing investigation for remedial investigation of feasibility studies for choice of options, a determination of the best way to clean up the site. That's still ongoing, and yet this project is being reviewed by the Surface Transportation Board. Over the years, the EPA, to its credit, had objected to and effectively prohibited development on that site because of that process was ongoing. No build, no build, no build. In about 2014 or 15, when Transrail changed the nature of its project, the EPA was called upon by Transrail to make a determination whether it would inherently interfere with the ongoing investigation, and they changed their tune. We've been continuing to apply pressure, sometimes successfully, it's a work in process, to the EPA and the process with the Surface Transportation Board to modify that position. But it is an EPA jurisdiction project, and so that is presently the bottom line. But the project, and I'll conclude by saying this, this project is different than typical projects and almost any others. In all frankness, I know that you've heard from some other candidate or candidates about a project in Holbrook on the Randolph town line. And as you know, we've represented the town of Randolph in many capacities over many years. And I've been special town counsel to Randolph now on that matter since 2010, litigating in the land court, in the Superior Court, arguing and representing them before the Boards of Health Planning Board in the town of Holbrook, which has so far approved the project, and in an extensive site assignment trial last fall that ran at 12 evening 5-hour sessions. That project is actually quite different. It is not, railroad is not integral to the project. and they're not a common carrier. So that unlike New England Transrail, the developer there is not subject to preemption or the exclusive jurisdiction of the Surface Transportation Board. Instead, their project is subject to the typical local site assignment and state site assignment process and other permitting. So you have really a unique and especially complicated process. But through my involvement in that other series of cases and my other environmental litigation work, I've become fluent in the language and have mastered the presentation and cross-examination of experts in a number of different environmental law fields that are relevant to the Olin and New England Transrail situation, including transportation, odor, vehicle emissions, stormwater, groundwater, wetlands, and so forth. So although the projects are very different and you have unique needs, you have, in me and in us, a familiarity, an intimate familiarity, knowledge of your particular issues of the Olin site and a capacity to handle those issues going forward.
No, I'm pretty much done. About 30 more seconds. New England Transrail, Olin Chemical is not going away. I mean, there has already been testimony. I went to Senator Markey's office where Senator Warren and the congressman, and we had a meeting. And I remember going there with the town manager and former Selectman Judy O'Connell as well. And we raised a lot of good questions, and we heard a lot. And we talked about a lot of things. And this is not going anywhere. And, you know, and people have gone on the record that would call whistleblowers that work for Olin, that they dug out the foundation and the cellar slab, and they put barrels in there, and they cemented over it. And it's testimony to show that they had whistleblowers that worked that company, told folks what happened. So we know what's in there, but we don't have a full knowledge of what. And this is a disaster. And I served on the board when the DEP said, listen, this is above us. It's a Superfund site. We need to give it to the authority of the federal government. And I'll be honest, this is well above my pay grade. I depend on somebody like yourself that's been dealing with it, and I don't proclaim to know the law. I don't. All I'm saying is this is your expertise. We've been battling this for a long time. New England Transrail, Olin Chemical is going nowhere. And it's no matter who we hire, this is our big focus. And I do have confidence in Mr. Deutsch, who's done an outstanding job. And I heard so many times, Ms. Salant, that outstanding litigators, outstanding. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Do you have for that, to answer his question, Mr. McCoy's question, how long for a transition would normally take place? You hadn't answered that question yet. You just told us about the issues.
Right. Well, I think that does speak to the complexities of it. You know, environmental. I'm not trying to dodge your question, Mr. Farrow.
Yeah, it's how long for the transition?
I mean, it would be unfair to estimate the number of hours involved. But okay. I will say this, just one sentence. However knowledgeable other lawyers or group of lawyers might be in the variety of environmental matters that are implicated by this site, it would take them more than book study and a few meetings to fully appreciate the nuances and get their head around the history and the implications of it. Things come up, law is, they say, a seamless web. And when you work on something with all these different tentacles, over time, things come up that relate to work that you did before and other conditions and circumstances. And you have that familiarity in us to begin with.
You serve now as special town counsel to Holbrook?
Randolph.
Oh,
we're in the position.
You mentioned Holbrook,
if
so
I
it's
can
Randolph.
clarify. The project is in Holbrook. It's been approved by the various Holbrook boards. And we represent the town of Randolph, which has opposed the project because many, if not most, of the impacts to the environment and to the community, including hundreds of truck trips per day carrying bulk solid waste, tarp-covered trucks would travel through the town of Randolph without any kind of compensation or financial benefit to that community. And so we've been working very hard to protect the interests, environment and welfare of that community. Holbrook is promoting the project and following the lead of the environmental attorneys that have been representing the project applicant.
So it's not, it's Randolph, you're a special town council, not
Yes.
Holbrook.
Okay, that's correct.
Let me just clarify one point, if I could.
Yeah.
On that. Holbrook is proposing a site that we think is going to cause pollution. The town of Randolph has hired us to protect the environment, to protect the public safety, and to protect the people of the town of Randolph and adjoining communities. So, what would be the best way to phrase it? We are the environmental protection people in that case.
Yeah,
Mr.
Mr.
Chairman,
Lott.
thank you. Thank you all for being here. Cannot deny the institutional knowledge that you six gentlemen and ladies have with the town of Wilmington, but I have a couple of questions that I have some concerns. And I asked, and Dan, thank you for answering Mr. McCoy and Mr. Kyra's questions, because I asked every other law firm about that case and their knowledge of going against Transrail and the NTSB in Olin and the federal governments, and a few of them eased my pain of if something were to happen and we changed firms. So that being said, Paul, I was very disappointed in your opening remarks picking on one of the competition. Not one other firm that we've seen so far has picked on anyone sitting in front of us. Okay? So I have a problem with that. I also have a problem with you knowing what other firms put in a bid. How that got to you, I don't know, but I have a problem with that. Another problem I have is currently in front of the Board of Appeals is a pretty controversial case, and a decision was made by someone on this table not to go to the Board of Appeals meetings for that, because the Board of Appeals chairman asked for the town council to be there. And for some reason, you guys decided not to be there. And I want to know why. Just because you're supposed to be protecting the town. And the lawyer that's up against the town wrote the land use book law in Massachusetts. So we thought, and I thought, he contacted me because he wanted to know if I could help him. So I want to know why, because I asked all the other firms, just to be fair, I mentioned the detox center case, and would it be smart for you to be there at the beginning or at the end? Because in my 14 years at the Board of Appeals and every 40B thing that we've done with your firm, you guys just wrote our decisions. Didn't come to any of the meetings. So how do you protect the town on a case like that when we have 5 volunteers on the board? So I need an answer before I go any further with you guys.
Well, you said 3 things, but let me take the last one. We did not make that decision.
Who did?
We at this table did not make that decision.
Was it advised that that decision be made? Or was that the recommendation of council?
I think it was the recommendation of council in consultation with the town, but at that time, no one at this table was lead counsel on that issue, which I'm speculating that you're discussing that you haven't specifically mentioned.
It's the detox case.
Yes.
That's
So I understand, and I was not part of the conversations necessarily between the town and prior council, but I did not make that decision. I don't think anyone here at this table made that decision.
All right, so now I'll rephrase my question. A case like the detox center or a 40B, because there's a lot of big parcels that are coming up and potential parcels that the Board of Appeals will need help on. Would you guys advise going to every meeting that case is called on?
In any hearing that the town wants us at that might be controversial, we would absolutely advise that we attend.
Okay.
And I would add to that I have sat through many 40B hearings, every one from the beginning to the end, wrote the decisions, defended them in the Housing Appeals Court, and so on. That's
not
been
in Wilmington, Paul.
not on Wilmington,
Okay.
but on other communities. That's kind of our standard. But in this case, we understood that in consultation between, I think it was John Foskett and someone with the town, that the decision was reached not to have council present at that hearing. No one has told me what the thinking was, but that group is the group that left our firm.
So one other question that I asked every other firm, except for the last one that was in with us because they're mainly a labor firm. At town meeting, I know that town council reviews the warrants. The town itself had an embarrassing situation with our sign bylaw that ended up getting withdrawn. Did you guys review that before we put it in front of the town people?
So I'd like to respond to that. Yes, we did review that. I reviewed that with your Director of Planning and Conservation.
Yep.
Sign bylaws often are one of those topics that engender discussion and controversy.
It's the reason why I asked the question.
Yeah, and so when the town was considering preparing revisions to its bylaw for this past annual town meeting, we suggested that there be a more substantial revision, that the bylaw needed a more substantial revision. It was decided by the team that it would be better to proceed without making substantial revisions because less change, I believe, I suspect it's because less change would engender less controversy. And if you recall, at town meeting, one of the reasons why there were a lot of questions, a lot of discussion about how the sign bylaw would be enforced, and it really didn't relate to the proposed sign bylaw. It really related back to the substantial provisions, substantive provisions of the prior bylaw, because those weren't really changing. It was what was being suggested was really just streamlining and administrative housekeeping type of article.
As a townsperson, we've been told that on a lot of bylaw changes in our bylaw book. And that particular bylaw, I know back in the day, every one of our Board of Appeals meeting had 2 or 3 sign things coming up, to the point where the town, at town meeting, changed it to the planning board, and some signs were allowed by right. So it's been 5 or 6 or 7 years since we've been talking about changing that bylaw, and it failed miserably.
I think that because of the nature of that type of bylaw, and because that the goal was really to try to regulate signs for commercial buildings without disturbing or doing any violence to the existing bylaw, that was the goal.
Right.
And so I don't think it was expected or anticipated what town meeting's reaction would be to the existing provisions of the existing bylaw. Yeah. So and that's what happened.
Okay.
And in any case, I understand that the town's planning department is taking that back to the drawing table, and we're prepared to help them tackle that and perhaps do as we suggested and implement substantial revisions.
All right, so that was part of a follow-up question that I had virtually with the other firms was, way before town meeting, like we're looking at an inclusionary bylaw. Is that something you could help with, Lou?
Absolutely.
Okay.
If I could just comment to that, because I didn't answer the other 2 points. The other meetings were televised, and
Yes,
I
they
did
were.
see you ask that question.
What?
And I did see you ask the question about inclusionary bylaws. And if you recall, at the MMA in January, I suggested to you and to Chairman Kyra that an inclusionary bylaw would benefit Wilmington. It was a good idea then. It's a good idea now. We have done that for other communities. We're prepared to do it for Wilmington. We think you ought to pursue it.
So Paul, you mentioned in January, but I've been talking about it for a year. So, yes, it's something that we want, and a few of us were disappointed it wasn't at our last town meeting. But because we're so deep in town meeting at the time, we got a promise that they're working on it now. And Valerie was here last night, and she was in before. And I hope it happens sooner rather than later.
We want to work with you on that. We're in agreement.
So I agree with you. The last 2 points I have, and I do know it's a little late, and I apologize, but we've given you guys more time than everyone else, but they're important. Training. I didn't see anything on training in your presentation. Everyone else involved had some type of form of training, if it had risen by the town.
Paul and I have personally overseen many trainings in many municipal issues, in particular open meeting law, public records law, state ethics law. Those matters touch all of the municipal employees at all times, and they all need to be cognizant of it, and it will keep the town out of sticky situations. We'd be more than happy to give that presentation to the town. In some towns, we give that presentation annually upon their request, and we'd be more than happy to do that for Wilmington as well.
I think it's pretty important.
We, just to follow up a little, we do that with labor and employment as
Yep.
well in harassment area, but I will say that you certainly have a very competent staff in the human resources area.
Yep.
I sent out an educational piece about the Fairness in Pregnancy Discrimination Act, and your assistant town manager had already sent the notice out that was required by the statute. So I'm always glad to hear those things.
Can I add one thing to that?
Yep.
We proposed a flat fee. In that flat fee is all the training you want.
Okay.
No cost.
The other thing that we had asked, a couple other members had asked about invoicing. I saw an invoice here tonight. Was that the first one the town's received similar to that, or is that something that going forward we can get on a monthly basis? Because quite honestly, Paul, we want to make sure that we're getting our bang for a buck at $308,000.
I understand, we'll do whatever you want.
Okay.
We were told at one point, or I was told by a lawyer who was working for Wilmington, from our firm, that for reasons relating to pretrial discovery and public records, you did not want that information available for the public. So we were told not to provide that information. We can provide that information. You want it, you'll get it.
I just want to make sure that the town's getting every bang for a buck, and we're not. You guys are in business to make money. We understand that, and you've got one invoice you showed us that you're losing money, so that's not also right.
I understand, but you'll.
This is a unique situation.
We'll give
very
you
unique.
We'll give you whatever you want, but you will see that we don't make any money off of this, and this isn't. We have such a long-term relationship. We're looking at the long term. We're looking at 10, 20, 30 years. We're not trying to make a quick buck over a bill or the next bill.
Can I just speak to that?
Sure.
Because I'm quiet tonight, and I'm not usually quiet. But when you have an entry, like, for example, that I would do, what you would have if it became public would be my conversations with so-and-so, my research into this issue, and et cetera, whatever I'm doing on that particular day in reference to that particular litigation. That's probably not something you want out there.
Mm-hmm.
Subject to privilege.
Yes, it's subject to privilege, but it's also making me put all my cards to the table for anyone who wants to see it. It's no problem with you guys seeing it, but I'm just saying that there could be an issue with that. Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah, I certainly
Yeah.
do. Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I believe
Just two follow-ups to Mr. Loud. Did you say that someone in the town, Mr. Duranzis, didn't want the billable hours?
Correct.
Okay. Do you know who that someone in the town was that didn't want you to list billable hours?
I was told that by John Foskett from talking to somebody at the town. I do not know who he talked to.
Mr. Hull, was that you not wanting billable hours?
No, it was, that practice had been in place when I took over.
That there were billable hours?
That there was just a statement, there were no billable hours associated with the statement.
And just to follow up on the other, Lou, you'd mentioned that regarding the appeals board not showing up, that you were informed by someone in town management. Do you know who that someone was?
No, I was discussing that with prior town council, Mr. Foskett. I did not talk directly with the town with regard to attendance at that hearing.
So you got that advice from Mr. Foskett?
I believe that he and I talked about it, about whether or not he or I would attend, and then ultimately he talked with the town, and I wasn't privy to that conversation directly, so I am not certain what the exact result was, but it was somehow at that point decided that neither he nor I would attend that hearing.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
if I may. So with that said, it's my understanding that the ZBA meets tomorrow night. Will there be someone there tomorrow night?
If you want them.
The detox center is not on tomorrow night. It moved to August 8th.
Oh, I'm sorry.
August 8th.
Yeah.
Thank you.
August 8th.
It's a huge case in town. There's a citizens group that has been formed and doing an excellent job of keeping the public informed. Personally, I'm against it because of right idea, wrong location. I've said that 100 times. I'm not afraid to say it again. But I know that the chairman was looking for help. So.
Okay, just to continue on with the follow-up, Mr. Manager. You wanted to respond
Yes,
to
I'd like
that?
to address a couple of the points that were raised, and then if possible, just pose at least one question. With regard to the ZBA, the conversation about the ZBA and whether or not town council was advised to participate in the meetings, I do recall having conversations with John Foskett and Dan Veerman at the time. I don't recall the detailed nature of the conversations, but my general recall was that Dan was not inclined to have town council participate in those meetings. The Zoning Board of Appeals for many years now, for whatever reasons, has been a very independent board and has not, at least from my understanding, sought participation from town council, whether it's been on this case or the Tresca case or any number of other cases that have come before the town. So it wasn't unusual that council was not requested for this case. Whether that should change going forward is certainly a different matter that further discussion can be had on, but I want to make it clear that based upon my recall that council, at the conclusion of the conversation, it was not the request of the Board of Appeals for council to attend that meeting. Second, with regard to the sign bylaw, sign bylaws, and I think prior interviewees have commented on the challenges with sign bylaws, that they're very visible, they tend to be very, can engender a lot of discussion. As Lou Ross indicated, the intent with that sign bylaw, recognizing that there would be a high level of attention paid to that, and that there was likely to be some amount of concern or pushback, we were looking to try to, rather than making a dramatic change all in one shot, try to take it incrementally. From my perspective, I don't believe that any of the blame, if there's an intent to disperse blame, should fall upon Lou or Deutsch Williams. I think the challenge in that particular meeting was, I suppose, the inability to convey the information the way we had intended it to. So I think, part of it was a communication issue. Perhaps in the future we need to have additional preliminary meetings to try to get people, get the information out to people prior to the public hearing, which, as you know, was part of the process. I didn't receive any response one way or the other to that, but I think it's important to put those 2 points out there. One of the things I would like to ask is, with respect to Rod Hoffman, I know during the preliminary interviews, screening interviews, there was some indication that Attorney Hoffman may be joining the firm. It was my understanding, and I think there's been independent conversations with Attorney Hoffman and members of my staff, that he was employed elsewhere. So I'm just trying to get a clarification as to what his status is.
He's available.
Is he working for
Yes.
the team here, or is
Yes,
he?
he is, indeed.
In what capacity?
In what capacity?
What is his title? Is he an associate? Is he of counsel?
He is of counsel.
So he would be available for any matters that may come up?
Yes.
Okay. The other question I wanted to pose is any thoughts that the team here has on ways that we collectively, if this is an arrangement going forward, can look to either reduce the cost, the legal costs, or at least hold fast on the costs. I mean, there's no question that we're spending a significant amount of money, over $300,000, on legal services. It's not a commentary as to the effectiveness. I think, has been pointed out, there's been a number of effective cases that we have prevailed upon, and as I think I've noted previously, one of the values of having a flat fee is the situation where we don't have to be as concerned about other parties taking us to court on the premise that, well, they're going to reverse their decision because the town isn't going to want to spend the money. So there's clearly that advantage to a flat fee, but there's no question that we're spending a healthy amount of money on legal services. So to the extent that you are able to offer any comment on that, are there things that can be done going forward, perhaps, that would reduce our legal costs?
For context, there was a comment made earlier that I think that you might be operating under the assumption that your hourly rate was the lowest of the submitted applications. That is not the case. You're on the higher end of the spectrum of the 5 firms that we've interviewed for hourly rate.
We offer a flat fee. The flat fee, we're not looking to increase. We're saying the same flat fee that we've had. No, we're not here saying our costs have gone up, we need more money. You take that hourly figure that's in that document, you have never gotten a bill from us for that hourly fee. You never get to the end of the year and then we say, whoops, you're $10,000 over or $50,000, and here's a bill at that amount. That's just an internal document that we use for our own purposes. But if you take that at 190, you take that at 180, you take that at 170, we're still losing money because that shows 155 is what's called the effective rate. In other words, if you take the amount of money paid,
I understand what effective
divide
rate
it by the
is.
total number of hours, the actual rate that we're getting paid is 155. That's before we deduct $4,000 that we have to pay to this Wendy Chu lady for handling a case that we agreed to pay. So it's actually probably down to like $110 an hour is what we're actually getting paid.
Okay, the town manager's question was there anything that you could do about the hourly, or basically the expense to the town for legal services? I didn't hear an answer there. Or the answer could be no, your quote is what it is. But
Well, I think part of the bidding process is when you ask people to give you numbers, they give you numbers. They give you, and they should stick by the numbers. And we're saying we've had a deal that's been comfortable for the town. Yeah, we don't think we've made money on it, but we haven't lost money, and we care. So we're prepared to go forward with that. We're prepared to say, let's look at it. We'll give you the hourly stuff if you want to run the risk of people serving public records requests and subpoenas and all that, and you want that information. You can look at it, and if we get to the end of the year and you think that you didn't get full value for those services, then we can talk about reducing it. We're pretty comfortable that you get to the end of the year, you're going to see that you had substantial savings with this flat rate.
I would like to add something very brief. And I echo Paul's comments, and I think speak for all of us sincerely when I say that we are committed and work hard and aggressively on behalf of the town. We understand that it's a challenge to balance access to legal services and the need for responsive and reliable advice and vigorous representation against budgetary concerns. And we respect that. We know that. We've been around the block innumerable times with communities. And we know what it costs in time and effort on our part and our expenses as a law firm. But we're committed to Wilmington and continuing to provide that quality of work product and responsiveness, and to increase that responsiveness where possible. The fee, the flat fee or retainer fee that we charge, which includes litigation, which I think you've heard from other candidates is quite unusual, is what it is in part because we have been called upon to expend that level of effort. If this board decides going forward that it might possibly reconsider that balance of budget and access. One thought, and I speak only for myself at this point, one thought is to increase the discussion with department heads, board members, in particular cases, appropriate cases, of what the ordinary cost of an undertaking might be, so that there is a more tangible sense of the extent to which the firm is exerting itself and spending time, a certain proportion of the annual retainer, on a particular matter. And that might help the town or constituent boards or officials think more acutely, and I don't mean this in any way of criticism, but think additionally about that balance. And then we work with you to determine whether you are where you need to be or not, and to think further about those issues. It might be a tool. That's one thought.
Mr. Chair, I would just also point out that with respect to this issue of receiving the backup in terms of billable hours and the diary that justifies those billable hours, I don't certainly believe it's appropriate to necessarily be critical of that decision. I think whether the board wants to revisit that or not is certainly another question, but I do clearly see the value in not receiving that information on a monthly basis in the event that we get records requests as part of a case or in other circumstances. There's information in those diaries that I would feel uncomfortable having to put out in the public forum. So I want to make it clear that I'm not certainly being critical of the fact that a decision was made at a point in time to not provide that information. I do know that there was a point probably maybe 4 years ago or thereabouts where in conversations with John Foskett, he indicated there was a need for an adjustment in the retainer rate, and there was some back and forth conversation, and he provided the hours, the actual billable hours that went into the costs that the firm was looking at. And so, we, based upon taking a look at that information, made some decisions as to how to go forward. But I think there's certainly some merit to the decision that was made.
Mr. McCoy.
Yeah, just something quick, but then the manager just said something, Jeff. Who made that decision not to want to see billable hours? Who made that decision to see who's talking to who?
I can't say specifically, only knowing that when I started as the town manager, that was how the bill was submitted, you know, with just the summary amount and then backup associated with expenses, mileage, copying costs, and
Yeah, I was going to talk about
so
something
on.
else, but when you brought that up, I was just curious. And I just want to remind my colleague, Mr. Loud, I know when you jumped on Mr. Dorenza saying no other law firm really jumped on another law firm. To be totally honest, Mr. Ed, when Copeland and Page was here, they said, we looked at the budget and we said, you're paying too much for legal fees. No one said a word. Then I talked to the gentleman, he had the bid, Bernstein or something, and I said, listen, you just took a shot at our town council, but yet you're saying we're paying too much, but yet you put in a price $1,000 more per month in fiscal year 2018 and another $1,000 in 2019. So I just want to refresh your memory, and I say it nicely, that they did say that, you know, so. Okay, no, that's all. I just wanted to say that. Thank you. Thank you, Selectman Loud. Thank you.
Just in regards to that, and when you brought up about the pricing, and I hear you what you're saying about the flat fee, but still there are 2 lower bids and 1 comparable. I know you said that you were the lowest, but in regards to billable hours, the rates, there are 2 firms that are lower than yours and 1 that's comparable to yours. And then, and I was a little disappointed in the beginning statement. I thought you were a little harsh, but that's my own personal opinion. Did you want to say something?
We quote a flat rate, and
You also
The-
quoted an hourly rate as well.
that wasn't a quote, that was to answer a question.
Your
No.
packet.
Your packet has an hourly
You had
rate.
2 different methods of
Oh,
billing.
did it in the packet?
Yeah.
Okay, I stand
You
corrected.
submitted it, yeah.
Okay. I was going to say that the actual rate that you're charged and have been charged is something south of $150 an hour.
Just one question from me, Mr. Durensis. You were hired as town council for Wilmington. Why were you removed as town council from Wilmington?
I wouldn't say removed is the correct word. I had, at the same time I took on Wilmington, I also took on Canton, and found myself stretched where phone calls would be coming in, and I couldn't, I felt, and I think the town felt, that they needed someone who was more anchored to the office, who would be there to take phone calls. I was spending a lot of time in town halls on the road. They needed somebody there for them and not be delayed. At least this is what was said to me. So we picked someone, just like I've picked Lou Ross, because he does most of the work and he's often in the office. And I think Jeff would be able to verify he's there to answer the phones. I am often on the road. I'm often at the State House. I'm often at Canton Town Hall, where I put a fair amount of time into it. It seemed like a better delivery of service to the town of Wilmington to have someone there for them to answer the phone all the time. So that was my understanding of what was going on.
Yeah, that's not my understanding as why you were removed as town council, but that's fine. Thank you for your recollection to that.
Mr. Chairman,
yes.
One follow-up on the flat fee. You keep saying you get a flat fee, but you want to charge us for copies, color copies, scanning, faxes, facsimile, all these different types of communication where no other applicant has done that.
Those are out-of-pocket costs?
No other applicant's done that. It's
They
part of
don't charge you
the,
for disbursements?
that we're not charging for copies, color copies, scanning, local faxes, all these other fees that you have in your proposal. So it's not a flat fee. It's a flat fee plus these expenses.
The legal fees are flat feed.
I understand that.
The out-of-pocket expenses, if we have to file a lawsuit, we pay a court $150 to file a complaint, we bill the client.
It says that here, and I understand that, and everyone else was the same way. I'm talking about The copies, the color copies, the scanning, the faxes, international faxes, telecommunications, postage, mileage.
The irony is that we haven't seen anybody send us a fax in a very long time.
I understand that.
And we haven't sent a fax in a
But-
very long time. So I can't recall the last time there ever was a bill for a fax. You may have a fax
I'm just pointing
machine.
out, Paul, that it's not a flat fee. It's a flat fee plus these expenses.
Out-of-pocket expenses, yes.
Okay.
Mr.
It's
Bennett?
different than others. Thank you.
Sorry to
Thank
interrupt.
you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I just want to close my remarks by, again, thanking you folks for coming. And certainly, this is going to be a difficult decision for us. I think all the 5 firms that we've interviewed are certainly worthy. I'm obviously very impressed by this group tonight, but I did want to just go on the record myself and kind of piggyback on what's been said. That I was, in a situation like this for me, where this decision is going to be so close because we've given so many great candidates, I also was kind of disappointed to hear the analogy that, we're the ones making the pizza and they're on their side of the counter because they don't know what they're doing. So that, to me, I just wanted to point that out, that was a little disappointing to hear. So that's just something I have to take into account when I'm making my decision.
Okay, does anybody else have any questions before we close? Would you like to give a summary comment before we adjourn the meeting?
Yes. We care about Wilmington. We care for 15 years. We care. We've been loyal. We've done what we've been asked to do. We've worked collaboratively with you. We've protected you. We've taken care of every situation. We've been asked to do whatever we've been asked to do, we have done. If there are changes that you want to make in color copies, we're happy to be flexible and to have that discussion. The comment about making pizza is just telling you the truth. It is what it is.
That's your opinion.
I live it every day. It is what it is. The town, I think, is very well served. You have quite a range of resources. You've seen the excellent litigation capability, land use capability, labor and employment capability, environmental and litigation capability, land use, real estate capability. You've seen the backup of 2 senior municipal lawyers who know municipal law, who can provide resource to the team. This is the team that you'll be working with on a day-to-day basis. They've got backup. They've got resources. We value the relationship with the town. We care about the town. We want to serve the town. We think you've benefited from our efforts. If there are things that aren't exactly to your liking, we'll fix it. This is the first I've heard that there's a concern about faxes and color copiers. That's an issue. We can address that issue. We're not inflexible. We want to work with you. We want to solve problems. We want to make the relationship better. We want to deliver to you what you want to have and the services that you want to have when you want them. If you want us at meetings, we'll be at meetings. If you want us to rewrite a sign bylaw, we'll rewrite a sign bylaw. We're a team. We consider ourselves on your side. We consider ourselves responsible for protecting you. Remember, 2 of us, Peter Barry is a 3-term selectman. I'm an 8-term selectman. We know what it means to be on that side of the table. We know what it means for what you need. We'll give you what you want. All for a flat fee with the color copy and the fax, which we can adjust. We're happy to be flexible.
Okay, thank you. We're going to conclude in a few minutes. I just want to thank you and
Thank you.
for being here.
I think this is theirs, yeah.
Mr. Copeland, nice to see you. How are you? Good. Thank you. Thank you for coming by. Thank you. Right.
Yes, yeah, I saw the emails, yeah. Yes, it's coming in.
Luckily, you were right. Thank you. Nice to see you. Thank you. Yep. Good. Just very nice to see you again. Thank you. Nice to see you again. Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Paul. Thanks, Dan. Thank you. Thanks for seeing. Yep. Thank you.
Okay, next on the agenda is communications, and we have none. Public comments. Is there anybody wish, I will recognize the gentleman first. He put his hand up first. Please state your name and address.
I'll go first if you like.
That's fine.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Suzanne Sullivan, 60 Long Street. I imagine the board knows why I'm here tonight. I'm here because I want to make a comment about town council, and there were some comments about, well, how long would it take for council to get on board? And I mean, that's really hard to say, but I will tell you this, that when the Olin site was turned over to the EPA, it took years for Jim DiLorenzo to get on board and to learn about the site. Years. And you can ask him that. Jeff can call him up on the phone and ask him, how long did it take you really, Jim, to get, you know, caught up with the Olin site? It took a long time. Dan Deutsch knows it. You know, New England Transrail is a huge issue for this community. We need a good law firm. You know, I just heard that there's another trash transfer station being proposed at the Whitney Barrel site, and they want to use the rail line. Yeah, I was shocked. I was at a meeting, they made a presentation to the community. We have issues, and we have issues in that area. And I've worked on this site for 20 years. I know that to a lot of people that doesn't seem like much. We have people that have spent thousands of volunteer hours on the Olin site, on New England Trail. And I'm serious, thousands. I don't think you understand how much work we put in. We don't get a lot of, you know, recognition for it. We don't do it for recognition. A lot of people don't even know half of what we do. We do a lot of technical work. We have other citizens in town that work really hard. We need to have good counsel. You can't cut our legs out from underneath us. Olin and Jeff knows, he was at one of the meetings with the head of the EPA. Just a few weeks ago we were there. And, you know, Olin doesn't want to clean up that site. They don't want to clean it up. They're looking for a waiver from the federal government not to clean that site. We have issues, and we have serious legal issues regarding Olin. We need to have good people. And I know a lot of these firms, they have talented people, but Dan Deutsch is known as one of the best. We need them. I mean, you know how Kim is. That's what we need for the community. I know there's a lot of other stuff to work out. I mean, I think you guys can work it out. But and from my perspective, for working 20 years on the Olin site, easily, maybe even more, thousands of hours. I really, really can't stress you guys how important it is. That's the only reason why I'm here today. And I respect the board's decision to want to hear from other firms and to hear even from Deutsch Williams. I think it's a good exercise to go through. I don't have a problem with that, but what I'm worried about is that all the little issues that you may have with this firm, you could actually really hurt us. And it will cost you more because whoever you take, if it's not Deutsch Williams, and Dan Deutsch isn't the counsel, it's gonna take a lot of hours for somebody to get caught up in the site. A lot of hours. And like I said, you can ask Jim DiLorenzo. It took him, we worked with him to try to get him caught up on all the particulars of the Olin site. And Jeff knows it takes a long time, you know? So I just wanted to say that to the board, and I hope when you're deliberating that you will give this some serious consideration, because all the other legal issues that we have, and I agree, I'm against the detox, that's another issue, but all the other issues that we have, nothing is more important legally when it comes to Olin and New England Transrail. Those really are the biggest issues that this community faces. You just think about if Olin doesn't clean up that plume, the impact that that will have on us, like, forever. And if they get that waiver from the EPA, and just remember, town council is the one that got that tolling agreement, so that we could still have a legal right if we have to, you know, go after Olin Chemical for the loss of our natural resource. And if they don't clean up that site, we'll never gain back that natural resource. And this town's gonna have to take legal action on that, I would hope. So I'm just saying, want to take a step back and take the broader look, that's all. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for hearing me out.
Thank you.
Can I just make a quick comment, she said, Mr. Chairman? I mean, I've been on the board a long time, and I remember Mr. DiLorenzo did acknowledge the citizens group basically being a great watchdog, and he's listened to the folks out there because, I mean, the citizen group, they really know a lot more than I know out there. And I'll say that. Not ashamed to say that. I don't think anybody knows more than what you folks in the citizen group know, you know. So I'm glad that they're involved. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. McDonald?
Mr. Chairman, I just want to thank you, Suzanne, for bringing that to our attention and all the endless hours that you and your group have brought, because you've educated me, like Mr. McCoy just said, you've educated a lot of us. And thank you for being here and bringing that to our attention. So thank you.
Please state your name and address.
Kevin McDonald, Wilmington, Mass. Last night when I was at the meeting, I brought up the fact that there's a revolving door with some of the government agencies and private industry. And I believe it was Mr. Deutsch tonight mentioned that the Olin Chief Counsel became counsel to the DEP, if I'm getting that correct. So that further confirms what I said last night. My concern is, when I look at the town website and I read a message from the town manager, it seems to state that the town manager directs the Board of Selectmen. In my mind, the Board of Selectmen is the boss of the town manager. I'd like that corrected on the website. But what I'd like you to do is to direct the manager, since he wasn't here last night, to have the monitoring sites that Olin is gonna extract samples from to do evaluations, for the town to actually have their own samples, so that the town can maybe have a third party, or hopefully the person that inspects our town wells can evaluate those samples. Maybe you can speak to us about that, Mr. Hull, as to the expertise of the water department and their daily testing of our water wells. That's one thing I'd like you to address tonight, Mr. Hull. And I heard today that there was I think it was a 365 unit 40R project that was actually going to be going on the other side of the railroad tracks, abutting the tracks on the other side of the detox. And it's called a 40R because I guess it's beside a railroad. So we could potentially have a 40R project there. I'd like to find out if those 365 units would alleviate, how much it would alleviate our 10% requirement for affordable housing. and maybe look at the impacts that are further created from that, so that the detox facility, in terms of stormwater management, soil conditions, and other things, might be impacted by that. I was up in Lawrence the other day.
Kevin, can we answer the questions?
Yeah,
You have about 4 or 5 in that one sentence.
I know, but you usually cut me off at like 5 minutes.
I know that, because we're
And
up to 5 minutes.
Would you be willing to extend me a little bit of time?
No, I'll give you the 5 minutes. You got about 3 to go.
Okay.
But we won't be able to answer the questions if you don't let us. But go ahead.
Okay.
Keep-
The last
use up
thing.
your
The
3.
last thing was, you guys vote on warrants, and I'm just surprised that you've never seen the billable hours. How long have you been here, Mr. Hull? And why haven't you taken the lead to request the billable hours? Why are you passing the buck to the previous manager? But answer the questions, please.
Let's see, with regard to the town website, I'll certainly take a look at the description. I'm presuming, although I'm not sure, that you're referring to a section that talks about the offices and the responsibilities of various offices. I don't. Yeah, I don't believe.
Why are they not directing you?
I don't believe that is the case, but I will certainly take a look at the website. It's never been my expectation or that I direct the Board of Selectmen. They, as you point out, I report to the board and they provide direction to me. So, in the unlikely circumstance that the website speaks otherwise, it'll be corrected, but I highly doubt the website is inaccurate. With regard to the town piggybacking every time Olin's consultant draws water samples to do our own sampling, I don't think that is necessary. I know you're a big proponent of not engaging in wasteful spending. I wouldn't want to foster that. There's certainly a protocol that the firm has to go through when they draw the water samples. EPA looks at the information that's presented, so I don't think that's necessary. With respect to the information about a 40R, I did become aware that some advertising is going on about the prospect of some kind of a 40R development on the north side of the railroad tracks in North Wilmington. As far as I know, and I've just returning from a couple of days off here, so perhaps things have changed in the last couple of days, but we don't have any specifics on this. It's been an advertising campaign in large measure, and as soon as I get more details, then I can inform the board.
So you're definitely not going to let us get our own samples? And the last thing was, who evaluates our own water? Do you have a competent person that has some type of testing equipment to identify chemicals in our own water every single day, so that if there is an impact, the wells get shut down before someone gets cancer or some other type of disease?
We do have a number of different chemicals that are tested for. I can't speak to the specifics. Certainly Mike Woods is far more...
But let him answer, Kevin. This is the last one.
The fact remains that we get a regular notice that goes out to residents annually about the quality of the work that is done on our sampling and the assurances that we have in place that we are monitoring the water the way we should be. So I don't have concerns.
We do this in the schools as well. We monitor the water in the schools. So.
Who's the competent person that monitors
Okay, we're going to
it every
move on.
day?
Thank you very much, Kevin. We appreciate it.
Are you representing the people?
Okay, we're moving on to new business. Do we have any new business to be brought before the board?
Just very briefly, last night I had made a request that if we had any unfunded liability policy in the town manager's office today, did actually provide me with I think it's called a contingent liabilities policy. So my question was certainly answered to my satisfaction.
Right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. So I would just suggest that after hearing the firms that we look at the references. You take your opportunity to call up the references. Maybe the town manager will have some references for us. Vet the firms. Take the opportunity to talk to the department heads. I know that I have, and I know that Mr. McCoy had mentioned that you received some positive comments of the last firm, and I've received some not so positive comments of the last firm. So. Feel free to make your phone calls, make your references, and that way there we can have a real good discussion at our next meeting.
So if I can just to be clear, the intent will be that for the 25th of June, that will be when this next comes up for a final decision?
That would be my understanding, unless someone wants to make it a different. Or would give us some time to.
The only concern I have is if we appoint a firm on the 25th, it gives the town manager and him 4 days to negotiate with that firm, and then we have to sign the contract, and then we're into July 1st, where we might not have coverage, because if it's not the last firm that was just here, we need time for a different firm to get that institutional knowledge that.
Well, let me say this: that word institutional knowledge. I mean, every law firm, I'm sure, will have an opportunity, whoever is selected, to review all of the material and all of the cases, and I know we throw this institutional knowledge phrase around quite a bit, but I have confidence in all the 5 law firms that they'd be able to pick up on all the issues that this town has. As for timing of negotiation of the contract, I mean, that could take the day of the next day. It could take a half hour. I mean, we have what they're offering. I think the biggest issue is that if we don't select the current firm or the new firm that reformed, it's the transition that's going to overlap. And I think that would happen anyways. If we made the decision tonight, or if we made the decision on the 18th or the 25th, there's still going to be probably a time period in July, maybe into August, where both of the firms will have a transition period, and we're going to have to more than likely pay both firms for that transition. So
Thank you.
That would be my thoughts on it. But it's up to the board if they want to move it up, or it's up to you.
Make the vote on the 25th?
To do the vote on the 25th.
Yeah.
Or move it up.
No matter who you hire, if it is somebody else other than the president, then obviously there's going to be a time.
A transition period.
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Just one other question or confirmation. So just to be clear, the board is going to be contacting references independently, or are you looking for references from me and those who participated in the screening process? I just want to make sure I'm
I don't have
clear.
a problem if the board wants to independently call for references on themselves, but I think that 1 or 2 references from you provided to the board would be helpful as well.
Right.
I mean, if Mr. Loud mentioned that he has a call into a particular town,
Yep.
so he's following up with those references. I've talked to several department heads myself and got their feel for it. So that's up to you.
I'm talking over the past close to 30 years.
Okay.
Different people from different times. Obviously, they've only been here for 15 years.
Right.
Yeah, I'm not saying, yeah.
Okay, that's fine. Yep.
Anything else under new business? Okay, important dates.
Important dates. Sundays.
That's 7 o'clock, just so you know. That was,
Okay. 7 o'clock. Important dates through September 30th, Farmers Market, Town Common, 10 a.m. to 1 p.m. June 14th, Flag Retirement Ceremony, Minuteman Headquarters, 7 p.m. The Relay for Life will run June 15th through the 16th. At the high school, starts that Friday afternoon. June 25th, Board of Selectmen's next meeting, Town Hall, Room 9, 7 p.m. June 29th through July 2nd, the Fun on the 4th fireworks. 978-657-8081 is the number to call if you have questions about the event, or funonthefourth.com. And the spectacular fireworks will take place on July 2nd. June 30th, Wilmington Fire Department versus Wilmington Police Department charity softball game. Wilmington High School softball field, 4 p.m. July 7th, library closed Saturdays for the summer, starting on July 7th. Board of Selectmen's meeting in July is July 9th, room 9, 7 p.m. July 11th, concerts on the Common, Jimmy and the Jesters, 6:30 p.m. to 8 p.m. July 11th, brush drop-off Old Main Street, 8 a.m. to 2 p.m. July 12th, Commission on Disabilities, Emergency Preparedness, Town Hall Auditorium, 10:30 a.m. to 12 p.m. Certainly, I would encourage those who have relatives that perhaps have a disability or who are disabled to come and find out about that program. I think it will be helpful. July 14th, brush drop-off Old Main Street, 9 a.m. to 4 p.m. July 18th, concert on the Common, Peking and the Mystics, 6:30 p.m. to 8 p.m. July 25th, concert on the Common, Perfect Crime, 6:30 p.m. to 8 p.m. And then July 26th through July 29th is the Moving Wall, the Town Common.
okay, I think that's it. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Motion made, seconded. All in favor? Unanimous? Thank you and good night.